All right, it looks like YouTube is picking up my connection, which is good. I will have to spread this around really quick. Eat. Here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stream. It's where the thing will happen. Pizza. So, how y'all doing? Hope y'all are doing okay. Uh, I'll be starting here in a minute. Just gotta get this all announced to places. That's okay, old miner. Get some rest. Nice to see you all again. It's been a while since I've streamed here. Play Risk of Rain 2. Uh, I mean, I could. Usually I try to stream games over to Twitch. Hang on a second. For some reason, YouTube is telling me that my bitrate is lower than 0 for audio. Can you guys still hear me? Or is my audio acting? Okay, so YouTube is just being weird. But normally I'd kind of think about doing game streams over to, what's it called? Oh, interestingly, Twitch chat works for that. But I would think about doing game streams over on Twitch, but I don't know. Not like I really post a whole lot on this channel, so maybe sometimes doing a game here and there would be fine. And that is fine, Cheesy Chaser. You get some rest then. Anyway, over here. Hello all. I can go ahead and hide this because the Twitch chat over here is functionally the same thing. So, just here to hang out, I guess, for a bit. Here to chat. If you guys have questions about TTRPG stuff, you can fire away on that. But the thing that I wanted to do and wanted to go over is actually, I wanted to actually take a look at some of the UA that Wizards of the Coast is introducing for D&D 1, which is a name I absolutely loathe. But I think it might be kind of interesting to kind of go through that and break down, like, hey, this is what's good about it, this is what isn't, etc. So, I guess we'll get into that. Get my tablet screen right here. Bring this down a little bit. Okay, let me just quick adjust something. Down a little more to the side. There we go. Let me move this over here. That way, you'll see the bottom. But yeah. So, basically, Well, it's probably going to be officially called 5.5 when it drops, but they're calling it One D&D because they always use like some kind of interesting name for the beta test. Like 5e was originally called D&D Next, which that was an all right name because it's like the next version of D&D. This one I don't really like because it's one D&D, as if there's only one D&D and there's only one tabletop you should ever play and ever need. And that's why we should make cyberpunk characters in D&D 5e because, you know, it's not like there's a tabletop RPG system that the entire franchise is based off of. Hey guys, how about let's make let's make a Warhammer 40k Space Marine in D&D. Now you might be thinking that'd be easier to do this in Starfinder, but yeah, I don't really hate 5e, though I am kind of tired of it as a system. Just because I've kind of moved on to playing more crunchy systems, I guess. But I do hate the hegemony that Wizards of the Coast kind of has. Not really a fan of that. Also, my mic keeps picking up my AC, which is which is why I keep randomly talking. I wish there was like a noise gate on this thing. But anyway, um, so the two UAs that they've had so far. First one, I'll just go over the character origins with you guys if you guys want to see what this is all about. So the character origins, this has released a while back, but it's basically like character creation options. And there are actually a lot of things that I do like in here. And I haven't played Call of Cthulhu, but I do like what I've seen about it. It's more just, how to put it, it's more like just that genre isn't so much one that is super interesting to me. Like I think it's pretty cool, and I think it's a really well done system, and I like how it handles a lot of things. Like chase rules for Call of Cthulhu I actually really enjoy, and I've actually adapted them into other games that I've ran. But I haven't played Call of Cthulhu directly, just because I like more some of the higher power fantasy. And Call of Cthulhu, you are definitely a big time mortal. But going through character origins here, so let's see what we got. So these are all pretty much standard. So the first thing that they actually point out here that is something that I actually like. The ability scores come from your background now rather than your race, and I think this makes a whole lot of sense. I think this is a good change because there can be a lot of diversity within a single race, in a single species, especially like a sapient one. So making this more based on what you've grown up doing makes a lot more sense. If you're a gladiator, even if you're like a tiny little halfling, you're gonna be a pretty strong halfling. So I do like the ability score bonus coming from that. Skill proficiencies, considering that this isn't really too much changed. Tool proficiencies, everything now gives one language and one tool, which I think barely balances things out. Tool proficiencies are still kind of weird, but they've made them a little bit more useful. The fact that all backgrounds now give feats as well is probably a good thing, considering that that was kind of the big complaint near the end of, or near some of the recent books, where they started introducing feats that would give you, or backgrounds that would just give you feats out the gate, and now they're actually bringing those in as a standard thing. So now the old backgrounds and stuff that are more universal will also be good for that. And then equipment, that's whatever. So let's see what we got here. Humans. Uh, they got some actual proficiencies now. Well, they kind of made this variant human standardized because everybody gets a feat at level 1 now. Um, Hello, matron. So, the one thing that they get inspiration whenever they finish a long rest. So the game is, everything that I've seen from this packet, inspiration is going to be a lot more prevalent overall. Proficiency in one skill of their choice, and then they can get either the skilled feat or another skill first level feat of their choice. I don't even know why they specify the skilled feat if it can just be one first level feat of your choice. The thing is that the races already get biological advantages and stuff in the form of their racial traits. So it's not so it doesn't necessarily have to come out just as a raw stat boost is the thing. Um, and if you're going to be limiting how many ASIs and how many ability boosts that a character gets, I would rather them come from the background than it does come from the race itself. So that overall is a change that I still do like more overall. They also have one other thing that also they introduced recently was a Ardling, which this is basically the not Aasimar, except they're more furry, I guess. And I like the concept of this is something that used to be in older editions, but they've used to have the concept of I'm gonna zoom in a little. They have the concept of versatile and like I wouldn't post the build of Edgar Pritchard because he's not my character. But he was pretty simple to build overall. He was just a Hexblade with Polar Master and Sentinel. And then some specific spell choices that kind of reflected that and were really powerful. He really liked Synaptic Static. It was his favorite damaging spell. But so one thing though that with Tieflings and Aasimar and stuff, they technically could be anything from the higher or lower planes originally. 3.5 never specified it, but 3.5 Tieflings were pretty diverse. And then Pathfinder themselves, they actually have diverse heritages for both of them. Like Pathfinder 1, Tieflings, you can be a Wigloth Tiefling, you can be a Diabolic Tiefling, you can be a Demonic Tiefling, you can be a Rakshasa Tiefling. I actually made one of those. And it's really cool because they also change what ASIs you get. Same thing also applied for the Aasimar. And so they've kind of incorporated the basics of that for Tieflings and Ardlings in this. That said, I find it really weird that they introduced Ardlings but didn't have Aasimar in this. Ah, you think this is a dog? Yes. Bark, bark, meow. Souls. But yeah, the Ardlings overall are pretty damn similar to what's it called? Pretty similar to Aasimars overall. Um, but otherwise they're just basically a reversal of Tieflings. They have resistance to Radiant instead of Fire, which is less useful. They have basically Celestial Legacy, which gives them spells. And then they also have Flight as a bonus action, which is pretty strong. And look, they finally introduced something of if you're in the air at the end of flight, you fall, as nothing is holding you aloft. Wow, I can't believe it was that hard for them to introduce basic flight rules. Yes, some lore about Zedcat, by the way. Uh, Zedcat is not a cat. Zedcat is actually a synthetic organism that infects machinery or biological components as well. So the most recent victim was a cat, was decapitated, and is now used as a host. Hee ho. You should be scared. Getting back to this. So yeah, Ardlings are weird angel furries. Kind of funny. Let me move a little bit closer to the mic. Then we got Dragonborn. Uh, they buffed him up a little bit. For one, the breath weapon that you have still takes an action, which kind of sucks, but it's now usable a number of proficiency bonuses, or the number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. Um, actually, no, they didn't buff it up. The damage still kind of sucks. It's D10 plus your character level, which I guess that's a lot of flat damage, but still. Uh, they finally gave him dark vision, which they needed, or which makes sense. But otherwise, they're pretty similar to what they were before. The breath weapon still isn't very good, though. Like, it's not... The issue with the breath weapon was always that it was just weak and didn't scale very well. Like, it's great at early levels, but after a while, you're giving up your entire action to do that damage, and it's not even all that much. And it's in a very, very narrow range. I really think that it should be like... This would be a little bit awkward, but like if it was a number of like a number of d6s equal to your proficiency bonus. So like at the end you're doing 66 and then add your level to that. I think that would probably be a solid way to handle it. Dwarves overall, they lost their subclass or their subrace. But the cool thing that they have, they can get Tremor Sense as a bonus action, which I think is actually pretty neat. And the fact that they're actually now classifying these different kinds of senses and are actually explaining how they work is also a good thing. Overall, not too much change for them. Favorite race? That's a tough one. Because I've never really played the same race, like, twice, usually. I've kind of changed it up every single time. Well, I guess I've played a few of them twice. Because, I've done a Oni-based tiefling in Pathfinder. He was a alchemist who was kind of a insane doctor, lawful evil or an evil character, actually. He would inject himself with mutagens and then maul people to death. I've played a Rakshasa tiefling who was a sorceress, and she was basically born into a noble family. Naturally, they were Rakshasas, but she was basically defective. Like, the thing with Rakshasas and the way that they work in their lore is that they'll have their human concubines, and the children that they birth will basically be Rakshasas. And then later on, they'll wind up eating their concubines because they eat human flesh. However, Nithera was my character. She was interesting because she was actually born as a tiefling because her mother had some kind of fiendish heritage somewhere down her line, and that wound up screwing with and interfering with the Rakshasa part, so she didn't develop properly. So she was a bit quote-unquote defective. So she wasn't able to shapeshift like a Rakshasa and things like that. And that was the lore that I had for her. But she wound up basically kind of rejecting her heritage. And actually did find some common ground with some of her family members and stuff. Like, some of them actually did wind up coming to the party side, which was neat. Also been lore that's based. Easiest way to get into Pathfinder, probably have a friend who likes Pathfinder and have them introduce you to it and run the game. I know that's not exactly the best answer, but also I just realized chat is kind of hard to see because it's behind my thingy. Move that there. But so yeah, I've played two tieflings. I've played humans as well. Like, one of my first Pathfinder 2 characters was actually a champion named Berthold, and he was just basically the team dad. I've also played it was just part of a West Marches style game, but he was a fighter who was basically all specialized into tower shields, named Lionel. I've also played Kitsune in Pathfinder and Pathfinder 2. Overall, I like a lot of the stuff Pathfinder 2 does. There are some games where I would prefer to run it in 1E, and some games where I prefer to run it in 2E. 2E is really well balanced and has a lot of diverse character options. Like, they've managed to both make the game balanced, but also preserve the character identities, which is really good. Because, like, a lot of the issues with games and stuff is when they start focusing heavily on balance, they wind up homogenizing a lot of things, and it makes things kind of boring. Like, that's one issue that I'm kind of starting to see with 5E. Pathfinder 1, however, has a lot of options and a lot of really high power scaling. So, like, if you want to do really wild, crazy, like, especially mythic level stuff, Pathfinder 1 is the way to go with that. Like, I have one character idea that I really want to do in a mythic game. The idea behind him is that he is a blood rager who's, like, from a line of, like, specialized adventurers and stuff who basically have formed, like, a very close alliance and relationship with dragons and stuff. So they basically kind of work as kind of like a order to, like, smite down evil and take out demons and stuff. And he's basically kind of the next in line for that, and would be for, like, a mythic level game where he's a draconic blood rager. Likewise, playing a spellcaster in Pathfinder 1 is super fun because you just get to blow things the hell up, and it's completely imbalanced. I still remember in one game that I was in that Fel here was actually running. Basically, through the combination of me and one of my friends, he was playing a gun chemist, which is a gun-based alchemist. We got into a mini boss fight. One of the bosses, like commanders, basically, are generals, and basically I was able to use meta magic to cast a what was it called? To cast Disintegration, the natural 20, thanks to my friend giving me a buff. And so it got a natural 20 on the hit. They failed their save as a result. And it was also a heightened spell, so it basically managed to do something on the order of like 400 damage in one spell cast. And it was blowing through a few resources, but it was kind of funny. Pathfinder 1 scales a little bit crazy. But yeah, gun chemists are actually pretty cool in Pathfinder 1, because basically in Pathfinder 1, Alchemist, they have something called, or they have a mechanic of bombs. And the thing about bombs is that they target touch AC, so you don't have to worry about a character's armor class, just their dodge chance. So bombs are very reliable to hit. And then they also do splash damage to anything in the area. So they basically are a way to do rapid, easy to do damage to a lot of targets very quickly that is very hard to resist. Gun Chemist changes this up a little bit by instead giving up the bombs and instead making infused bullets that explode. So they only hit one target, but they're still taking advantage of the touch AC, and now you have the range of the gun and the power of a gun behind it. For what it's worth, guns aren't really significantly stronger than other ranged options, because they still don't add your modifier to damage, and they're still only usually doing like 1d8 of damage. But they're still targeting touch AC, so they're really reliable. And the gun chemist in our game had something called a double hack butt, which is banned in society play. Bell is kind of a fan of letting players use overpowered options, but I digress. It basically is a 2d12 gun that requires 2 full actions to reload. So, there was that. Yeah. No. Guns are not at all like a fireball. Guns are precision weapons. The thing with Pathfinder 1 is guns, again, target touch AC. So normally your AC is calculated based on 10 plus your dexterity modifier, plus your armor bonus, minus any dexterity penalties. So heavy armor might have more of a dexterity cap, essentially. So like if you're wearing heavy armor, it might only allow you to take a +1 from your dexterity, but it gives you like a +5 from your armor. And then you have all these other sources of armor, such as like magic item bonuses and stuff like that. Guns get to ignore all that. The only thing that affects them is your dexterity modifier and your dodge bonuses. So how well you can dodge, because the idea is that guns basically have so much penetration power that they can't be deflected. So as a result, there's kind of like this trifecta in Pathfinder 1 that's kind of funny. It is dragon beats monk, monk beats gunslinger, gunslinger beats dragon. And the thing is, a dragon has really high AC, but because it's so big, it has a poor dodge chance, which means the gunslinger can always hit it. However, the gunslinger has a hard time hitting the monk because the monk has a high dodge chance, so the monk can just get in there and pummel the shit out of the gunslinger. And then the dragon has breath weapons and so much armor that the monk can't touch him, and the monk basically takes the damage from the breath weapons and stuff, even if he succeeds on the save. So the dragon will eventually whittle him down that way. So it's kind of the funny trifecta there. My friends are planning on starting a D&D game and I'm the DM. It's first time. I would recommend keeping it simple largely. Try to stick to, like, you can reflavor stuff as much as you'd like. However, I would recommend trying to stick with mainly just like vanilla options and stuff. Like, don't try to do too much crazy stuff unless you have like access to it, and then unless you understand how it works. The key thing as well is there's some pieces of DM advice overall. You want to try and adapt to what the players plan and stuff. Like, one of the biggest issues that I've seen in D&D, as well as like I've made this mistake myself, you never want to have one specific answer for a solution, especially when it comes to puzzles, because it is really frustrating when a player comes up with an answer that seems like it would be correct and sounds completely logical, and it's actually more logical than what the actual answer is, or is a potential solution, and then it's not the right solution, so you can't use it and stuff, and then the actual answer feels very arbitrary. The thing that you want to do is make sure you basically want to work with the players and kind of like adapt what the solutions are without like revealing too much to them, because they don't know what's on the other side of the screen, so they don't know if you changed the answer and stuff, or if you've made adjustments to stat blocks and things like that. Use that to your advantage. The other thing as well is avoid situations where the players don't have any agency. If you're going to be taking away agency from the players, there has to be a good reason for it. Like, if you're just arbitrarily arresting the players with guards and it's an encounter that they can't hope to win or run from, and it's like if they try to, they'll die, it feels really bad, and like they're just kind of being railroaded and strung along. You also got to kind of be aware of, like, sometimes when you put situations on players, how you might be implying that that's the situation, even if that's not what you mean. But overall, you want to just try to respect player agency and try to work with players to make sure that their choices and their visions and that their fantasies that they have for their characters are realized. As far as mechanically running stuff, you don't have to roll for everything. If the status require players to roll if the status of the roll is going to be in question. So sometimes that might mean that one player might have to roll for something, but another player might not need to because they just automatically know that thing. Like, if they're a wizard, I would argue that they should understand basic magic stuff, whereas like a fighter might have to roll for it. Or you could basically be something from the background. Likewise, rolling a natural 20 doesn't automatically mean whatever the player wants to have happen happens. It means that if it was a result that was in question and you had them roll for it and they get a natural 20, then if you're going to be going with 20 as always success, then you always want to go with what is the most reasonable form of success. So this is a common example, but like if a bard goes up, rolls a natural 20 on their persuasion, gets a 30 for convincing the king to give him his kingdom, the king would instead laugh and just kind of laugh it off, and like he would find it really funny, and then he would basically give the players like an invitation to stay at the castle or something that night because he wants to talk more to this bard and hear more of his jokes or something, and like give him a little perk or something. That might be one way to do it. Or it might just be that if it's like an evil king, he's very amused by this and he's like, he doesn't want to kill the bard because he thinks that it's fine. And great spam bots. Go away, we don't want you. But playing D&D and tabletops at a side view rather than a bird's eye view, there are a few things. Just a few general tips. One is always try to think about making a character, not just a mechanical sheet. Like, in my opinion, the best balance is basically trying to figure out a way to get mechanics on your character that embody what the fantasy that you have and your character's personality. Like, that's one thing that I liked about Edgar, is that even though he was very min-maxy and kind of a munchkin character, and we make fun of Forte for that all the time, Edgar's mechanics still reflected the idea of, hey, it came out in his roleplay stuff of like, hey, he's like, doesn't realize how powerful he actually is and stuff like that. So when he's like doing a lot of damage and he's like kind of blowing through all his resources instantly and it's way overkill, he's not managing his resources well, and it's doing a lot of damage, but it's also leaving him kind of dry. And it kind of makes sense because he doesn't realize how to control it fully. So yeah, you want your mechanics. And now Edgar wasn't the best example, but he was still a good example. There's other ways and stuff that you want to think about how to make your characters reflect or how to make your mechanics reflect your character. You don't want to just go for the purely optimal option always. Other things as far as playing as a player, I would also highly recommend figuring out how to build a chemistry with your other players, and not just the players but also their characters. Like, the issue that always people have with the whole lone wolf archetype is that they don't interact with the rest of the party. But a lone wolf type can still work with the party and stuff as long as they're like, as long as everybody's on board with that, and like there's a way that they kind of keep their distance from the party, and it's kind of something that is like established with the other players. Overall, like, you want your characters and stuff to, how to put it, it's more interesting if your character has a history with the other characters as well. Like, one thing that I've always liked is building the backstory before the game starts and building it with the other players. Like, one game that we also did, it was actually the same campaign with Edgar, but when we had a side story where we made new characters for a time, the idea was basically Salrella was going to Sondor, or the nation of Sondor, and she was going to try and sabotage some kind of weapon because she was being commissioned by her agency. And so she needed to recruit a bunch of thieves. So we all made a little gang of characters that were in their own kind of tiny thieves guild. It wasn't really a guild, it was more just a gang. But we all made characters that were part of this. And then Sal came up and met us and hired us all on the spot to sneak her into Sondor and stuff like that. And so we kind of had like a history. We all had a history together, and it wound up being like Forte's character, aka Edgar's player. We both were playing half elves, and then we kind of realized, wait a minute, we both kind of have a similar backstory of kind of having a sleazy father. Maybe we're actually half brothers, and that just kind of came out of circumstance, and it was hilarious. But I actually want to kind of make an animated D&D of that story, because that entire segment of the story and adventure was great. Like, we basically wound up sneaking in it. It was like that is basically the kind of thing that I would consider to be how to run a heist in D&D, because the heist that we pulled off was really rad, and even the riddles and stuff that Spencer created were really cool. And it was a great way to show, like, hey, here's how you can do like skill challenges and stuff like that without having to focus on combat. But anyway, what else was here? Quick question. From a player's perspective, how do you deal with a problematic DM shooting down one player because he plays too smart? Well, there's two things. One, players shouldn't be metagaming and stuff. That is one thing that is a really annoying issue. Because metagaming does get to be a problem. Like, I've had situations and stuff where it's like, hey, a player was using a cursed dagger, and it's like they feel like this flash of like rage and stuff, and it makes them want to use it and stab things. And then the player just like looks at the they have their character look at the dagger, and then they just slowly put it away, completely ignoring like the impulses that were suggested. You don't want to like overwrite people's characters naturally, but also that was kind of like metagaming knowledge. Likewise, I also had one situation where it was like I had a bunch of chests in a room, and one player wanted to look through them, and so I was like, okay. I was kind of still new to DMing at this time, but I was like, okay, roll for it. He rolls the dice, got a nat 20. Okay, you find a rifle in there. And then he's like, if somebody else starts talking, he just kind of butts in, hey, what's in the next one? And he rolls for it. And he just starts rolling dice rapid fire because he knows, like, hey, there's a chance based on this dice roll that there will be loot inside. And so you kind of do want to avoid situations like that. The problem that I've more had with DMs is, again, I've made this mistake many times, is removing agency or implying that there's not choices, even if it's completely by accident. The other problem that I've had and also ran into myself, a DM really shouldn't. You want to make sure you communicate with your DM and you like tell them if you feel things are wrong. I had one situation, for instance, where the DM that I had kind of didn't really understand how my class worked, and they were going based off of older systems rules. And it was actually actively hurting my character because a lot of my features were basically being ignored as a result because I couldn't use them. And there were some choices that I wound up making for my character that I was expecting one kind of game, and then I wasn't able to use them because, like, hey, we're trapped in the wilderness, so all these social traits that I took and these social invocations, they're completely useless for the next 2 levels, because that's how long it took for us to finally get out of the wilderness. And so eventually I did talk to that DM, told him I wanted to retire the character and go with a different one. That's one way to do it. But you want to, if you're having issues, you want to try and talk to the DM about it and try to understand where they're coming from, and try to explain to them where you're coming from as well. Because one thing that a DM should do overall is they should make sure that they're disclosing things up front for their players, so that way they're not making choices and not building characters that like just don't fit in the game. But overall, there is responsibility on both the player and the DM both to work through that kind of stuff. The DM should be understanding of what the player wants to do and should try to figure out how to make that happen or how to represent that, and should also pay attention to what the player is like doing overall. Like, one other thing about that game that kind of got frustrating was my backstory elements for my character were basically just never really touched on. And the DM asked me to give ideas and stuff, and then none of them were used. And that kind of felt bad. If you want to play a Juggernaut type character, that depends completely on which system you're playing. There's ways to play quote unquote tanks in every single game. Um, in Pathfinder 2, my favorite way to do it, like, there's multiple ways to go about doing it. Barbarian's great for being a Juggernaut because you get um, just a bigger health pool than everybody else. But one of my favorite ways actually was a two-handed tower shield user. And he was basically using these certain feats from Knights of Last Wall that allowed him to two-hand his shield, which increased its hardness, which allowed it to absorb more damage. Because the way shields work in Pathfinder is actually pretty cool. While they require an action to rage out of your 3 actions, you can use your reaction when you have it raised to actually absorb a hit. So you not only get the armor bonus for it, you also get to reduce the damage that you take, potentially completely negating it as well. But your shield has basically a health pool of its own, and you can repair it between combats. Though it does kind of make it a little bit frustrating for players who have a magic shield, because if that magic shield breaks, magic's completely lost. So the idea is basically, when a shield loses half its health, it's no longer usable. And if you continue to try to use it, you can use it at a penalty, but then it can just completely shatter. Hello, Skymock. I don't know what the WOTFI is. I am afraid. My cat. And yeah, a good DM tries to introduce backstory elements into the world itself. One thing that's actually kind of interesting, I've been looking at Cyberpunk Red, and they actually have like advice on how to do that and stuff like that, and it's really nice how it's done. Um, but yeah, overall, making a tank character, that's how I would do it in Pathfinder. My favorite way to do it in Pathfinder 2. There's other ways. There's actually numerous ways. In 5e, barbarians are generally seen as some of the best tanks because they can get resistance to damage. You can also do like a fighter. I did a heavy armor fighter in Spencer's game, the one with Salrella and Edgar and stuff like that. Um, after playing my druid, I switched over to a fighter. Um, in Pathfinder 1 and 3.5 and stuff, generally things like fighter and paladin are great for that. The thing with tank style characters is that remember that you don't have like a means to force a target to attack you necessarily. Some systems give you actually traits for that, where it's like in 5e, there is the Cavalier fighter subclass, which when you hit a target, you can mark them, and then any attacks that they make against targets other than you are at disadvantage. So you encourage them to fight you specifically. But you can't force somebody to do that unless you have like mind control or specialized skills. Yeah. The big thing with running D&D the first time that I would also recommend is just kind of go with the flow. Don't overcomplicate things. Try to keep it simpler. In fact, usually what I would recommend for if you haven't started a session yet, I would recommend trying to keep it to a short game, like maybe like 2 levels. Make it a one shot or something. Um, the hard part is like generally when people first run a game, they want to start at like level 1, and that's actually a good thing. But also like it's not as interesting because it's all the balance is a lot more delicate at that point. So you usually want to make it a less combat focused session. You also have the issue of like you just don't have a lot of your features and stuff. So then people will want to run at a higher level, but then if they're brand new to the game, they're kind of bombarded with a lot of choices that they're not familiar with. So it's kind of a rough spot. Um, but overall, just try to roll with it and stuff like that. Um, all right. I'm going to be right back because I got to use the bathroom really quick. I'm going to just run an ad here. I will return. BRB. Let me put up a little sign. Let's see here. Text. All right. I will return. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I had to step out for a moment. So anyway, I have returned. What were we talking about last? Anyway, going back to some of the lineages and stuff. Just going back over to this document. So we talked about dwarf, ardling, etc. Elf overall still is jammed packed with features. They now have advantage versus charmed, which makes sense. Proficiency with perception as before. Don't need sleep as before. And now they also have their lineage basically gives them spells and perks and stuff, and that's where they have the sub races now. They're not as nuanced and diverse as before. One thing I kind of wish that they were introducing overall for the races was the concept of like variable features, where instead of like making it just the lineages and stuff, if instead they had like, hey, for this feature, you can take one of 3 options and stuff, and then you lock it in at level 1. Make it a little bit more customizable. I think that would be a good thing to do. I've done that a few times with some races. But, eh. Skipping around. Orcs overall are kind of interesting. They've buffed up Adrenaline Rush a bit, which is neat. And they've put the Relentless Endurance, so now if you become a half-orc by combining orc and human, you can choose which of these traits that you get, which is neat. I do like the idea of half races and stuff being more modular, where you can combine one race with another and just take your choice of which features to use. But it does kind of remove some of the lore behind it, because it's kind of all over the place. But one thing, just going back to Pathfinder 2 a bit, the way that they've addressed this, because they've actually come up with this idea long before 5e has, and the way that they did it was way more elegant. In Pathfinder 2, you basically have your races known as ancestries, and then you have your heritages, which are basically your sub-races, essentially. And every single race has several heritages that they can take, but then there's also versatile heritages which anybody can take. So you can combine so Tiefling is an example of a versatile heritage. So you can have a dwarvish Tiefling, completely rules as written, and you don't have to like kit bash it and stuff and try to figure out how it works and things like that. Literally, it just means you get, instead of getting the heritage options, the heritage bonuses from the dwarf, you get the heritage bonuses from the Tiefling, and then you can choose from feats from either the Tiefling or the Dwarven list, provided that you have the right requirements. So, like, if you're a Dwarf Tiefling, you can't take things that require you to be a Mountain Dwarf, but you can take any of the other Dwarf Ancestry feats, which they have Ancestry feats to further give you your class features, because most of your not class features, racial features. And as a result, because these are things that you get as you level up, you can get like really powerful racial traits and stuff. Like some of them allow you to literally turn, like one of the Kitsune ones literally allows you to turn into a giant fox demon at like level 17 as a racial trait. And I'm talking about like a huge size monster. It's cool. Yeah, going back to this, Tiefling, as I mentioned, they kind of have various legacies now, which I think this is a good change, because they got Demonic, Yugoloth, and then Diabolic, and stuff like that. So you can kind of embody any of the lower planes, which is neat. And no, halflings are not like mules at all. Halflings are their own species and their own race. How to put it? Halflings and gnomes are basically the small versions of humans and elves, essentially. Gnomes are kind of fey-touched halflings. Well, not really fey-touched halflings, but they're fey-touched small humanoids. So they're very similar in that respect to elves. And however, for some reason, gnomes are just significantly more puntable than halflings. Thank you for sharing my cat, Tom. Let's see what else. So, going back a little bit, we got the backgrounds now. This is the one thing that I was actually saying is actually pretty good. People actually misread this when it first came out. They thought that the language was innately tied to the background when these are all sample backgrounds. These are meant to be customized, and these are just examples. So like Acolyte is +2 wisdom, +1 intelligence. You could retool this to be +2 intelligence, +1 wisdom. Or heck, +2 wisdom, +1 charisma. However you want to tool it and stuff like that. As long as it makes sense for what you're coming up with for the background. And you can even rename it. Like, these are all meant to be templates, not meant to be the actual things. Thank you, Skymock. I hopefully will make more animations in the future. But, like, people are also getting angry over the languages and stuff, like how Gladiator was listed as knowing Orcish. But, again, that's just an example. One thing that does kind of feel a little bit weird is how Thieves' Cant has basically kind of been... Thieves' Cant and Druidic have kind of been downgraded to just conventional languages that anybody can take, but they're still secret languages. I'll get into that a little bit later, though. But overall, I do like how this overall is constructed, because I like the idea of, again, the ASI is being tied to the background, because that makes more sense than being from the race. If you can't have both, that is, because some systems do actually allow both. Like Pathfinder 2, for instance, when you're building your character, you get an ability boost from the class that you choose, from the race that you choose, which also includes a free boost usually, from the background that you choose, and then you also get 4 boosts that you can put anywhere you want. And all your stats otherwise start at 10, so it's basically a point-buy system, but it's one that is very customizable. And I like that. Level 20 character for a one-shot. God, I have no idea. I haven't thought about level. I've played level 20 one time, and that was for a campaign that, and that was for the campaign that I've talked about a lot. I ended that campaign at level 20 with my fighter. 17 levels of fighter. Oh no, yeah, 3 levels of ranger, 17 levels of fighter. Basically super tanky, dragonborn character. But be honest, 5e, it's hard for me to say. Pathfinder 1? Oh, wait, yeah, you said hypothetical Pathfinder 1 character. The idea that I would actually have for that, I would want to play a Blood Rager barbarian. And the idea is basically he is draconic blooded, because his family basically comes from a legion of adventurers that is dedicated to slaying evil dragons and has worked with good dragons to basically try to strike down evil. And so the idea would basically be, whenever he would blood rage and stuff, he would basically transform into a giant brutish dragon and just kind of like maul the hell out of things and use his magic for that. I think that would be really cool. It's something that I really want. Like, if I ever played Wrath of the Righteous, he is the character that I would want to bring to that. If you want to find D&D tips, you find them here. If you're clicking the link that is in my chat, that is asking if you want to give me a tip. And no, Omni DMD is even worse. Or is even worse. The issue I have with the name One D&D is that it kind of just implies that D&D is the only system, and it's very egotistical. And D&D has already had kind of a reputation for pushing away a lot of other systems because it's kind of become so heteronomous and is monolithic that people kind of forget that other systems exist. I've made the joke about it before. Let me actually just pull this up. I made a hit tweet, everybody. Hey, wow, it sure would be neat if Cyberpunk had a tabletop RPG system. Let's play D&D and Cyberpunk Edge Runners. It's not like Cyberpunk is based off of an entire tabletop system anyway. But yeah, that kind of bugs me. I don't like how monolithic 5e is. I think it's fine as a system, and I think it's even fun to run. It's not good for every single game, and I don't like trying to kit bash everything into 5e. It's like trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. And the thing that hurts most about it is that article in particular, like, they talk about how to make the characters in 5e, and then they say it would probably be easier to do this in Shadowrun instead of, I don't know, Cyberpunk 2020 or Cyberpunk Red, you know, the systems that the entire franchise is based off of. Like, it didn't even acknowledge the actual system the games are from. I don't know. If it was more like an article that was instead like, hey, here's some rules from Cyberpunk Red that we can adapt into 5e, I think that would be more tolerable. Because I'm fine with like people adapting rules and stuff. It's just I don't want everything to be in 5e. Not every story needs to be in 5e. The thing also with systems overall is like 5e and systems like Pathfinder and stuff like that are very much hero focused systems. You are exceptional individuals who are doing incredible feats of mastery. Whereas systems like Cyberpunk are a lot more grounded. You might be going really strong for a while, but the danger is always there. And then you also have games like Call of Cthulhu, where you're even more immortal and stuff like that. And they offer a very different experience. Like, I guess the way I would put it is that there's more humility in a system like Cyberpunk, and that's kind of intrinsic to the genre of Cyberpunk. Because the other thing that other people get confused on, Cyberpunk is not a video game. Cyberpunk 2077 is a video game. Cyberpunk, there's two things. You can do Cyberpunk TM, which is, god damn it, why do they keep showing up? Get the fuck out of here. We don't want any. But I would basically describe the thing that I would describe with some of the systems is that like Cyberpunk and especially Call of Cthulhu, they really kind of force you to have a bit of humility with your characters. It's not even just like Cyberpunk as I was saying, Cyberpunk TM is an IP that has existed since 1989 and is a tabletop role-playing game. Cyberpunk as a whole is a genre that has been around for even longer. Like Ghost in the Shell, Cyberpunk Edge Runners is the most recent example. God, there's way more examples that just do not come to mind at the moment. Shadowrun is another common one. Blade Runner is a very popular one. Technically, iRobot, at least the more modern adaptations, even if they're not very good, those are all examples of the cyberpunk genre. Cyberpunk overall is essentially a genre. It's not even just a matter of just solely the introduction of cybernetics. Cyberpunk as a whole is media that basically kind of explores the concept of transhumanism taken to the next level and stuff, where it's like, hey, so you started off with glasses. Well, now instead of having to use glasses to adjust your sight, you can just replace the eye. Where does the line between human and like an extension and like a tool, like where is that line drawn? And it kind of addresses that, as well as addressing things such as like it's very like capitalism, basically like how like capital kind of forces everybody to kind of go to extreme ends. Like that is a hugely central theme to Edge Runners, for instance, where it's basically a bunch of people who are essentially kind of just having to deal with the hand that they're dealt and trying to make the best of it. and they have to go through and do some really messed up shit and stuff. Cyberpunk is honestly one of my favorite genres as a whole, and that's even more the case after watching Edgerunners and stuff. But Cyberpunk as a whole, as a genre, isn't very hopeful usually, is the thing. So, like, usually if there's hope in Cyberpunk, it means that the media is moving to a post-Cyberpunk thing, a post-Cyberpunk setting where it's like the difficulties of Cyberpunk have been overcome. But generally it's the thing that's scary about Cyberpunk overall is yeah, you basically follow the corpo pipeline or you die trying to make it on your own. There is no real alternative in Cyberpunk as a genre. And that's the thing that's really kind of depressing about it. Like, people say, like, oh yeah, I want to live in Night City and stuff. And it's like, no, you don't. You do not want to live in Night City, man. It's great for stories and stuff and great for character development, but it's a dark place. It's rough. There's no escaping it. And the weird puppet rig thing is my VTuber avatar. He's just a completely normal cat. Do not pay attention. No, the meme is basically living in California sucks. But yeah, Cyberpunk usually doesn't have a very hopeful ending. That said, that doesn't mean hope can't be a theme of Cyberpunk and stuff. And I think actually it makes it more um it feels like it has more of an impact when there's like a hopeful message in a Cyberpunk story. Like, even if the characters and stuff aren't able to accomplish what they wanted to do, they kind of pave the way for the future to maybe move down that path. Doesn't always happen, but anyway, going back. So, went over some of the languages and stuff. Let's go back to looking at this. So, feats. So they've introduced a bunch of first level feats, and I actually like a lot of these first level feats. They still have lucky in there. Still really strong, but I like these because these are really flavorful options, and these work as a first level feat as a result. Star Wars. Star Wars is not cyberpunk. Star Wars is a space western, or at least the original trilogy is a space western. The prequels are more space fantasy, and then the new trilogy is kind of in between, and all of them are space operas overall. Um, but like Star Wars, the original trilogy. Well, no, it's not that the humans and the robots are separate, because that's actually not like that's not a requirement for Cyberpunk. Actually, uh, the issue with Star Wars. Okay, one at a time, people. The thing with Star Wars though is that the themes of Star Wars aren't actually central to the themes of Cyberpunk. The themes of Cyberpunk are more about like transhumanism and like as mentioned the erosion of the soul. Ghost in the Shell is an archetypal version of Cyberpunk. That is like one to one a Cyberpunk genre because that's basically kind of talking about how um well, you have the whole thing of like the ghost and the shell and the stuff, and like where does the human soul lie in that equation and stuff like that. Metal Gear Rising is what I would argue as a precursor to Cyberpunk. It has some of the elements of Cyberpunk, but the world hasn't gone completely to shit just yet in that. So it's on the path to becoming Cyberpunk, but it's not quite there yet. It's not addressing the themes directly of Cyberpunk, though it has some, or like the themes as a whole, but it has some of them. Um, and no, Star Wars is sci-fi. It's absolutely sci-fi. not the only kind of sci-fi out there. I mean, technically, Frankenstein was the very first instance of sci-fi. Um, but sci-fi is also kind of a broad genre. It's the idea of basically fiction and fantasy that is fueled more by technology rather than by magic. Tokyo Ghoul, I haven't seen. I think it might be cyber. I don't know. I don't know too much about it. You know, I could totally see a modern retelling of Frankenstein that actually goes full on cyberpunk, where it's like somebody trying to resurrect a dead loved one or something like that, or trying to rebuild an artificial human, and like Frankenstein's monster as a result is a mechanical monstrosity or something. Uh, Terminator is no, Terminator isn't just is just sci-fi. And again, it's not just that we're meat machines, it's kind of addressing more philosophical questions and stuff. Like, again, just having cybernetics is not enough for something to qualify as cyberpunk. Uh, Martin, you're only, maybe if you're, no, that's not the case. It's still a space setting, still very much a sci-fi setting, and there's still a hugely significant focus on, like, the machinery and the technology around it. While they do have the force and stuff, it's more treated like psionics, which psionics are still very much a sci-fi concept, not a magic concept. Um, oh, Robot Magical Girl, hang on a second. I have something for this. Let me see if I can find it. Here, have an old comic page of mine. And, of course, my mouse is being weird. I want to go home. Oh yeah, Matrix is absolutely cyberpunk, and it's a pretty far gone cyberpunk setting. But god damn it, why are these bots so fucking aggressive? But yeah, Matrix is another example. Deus Ex, how could I forget that one? That's a very common example. System Shock is another great example of cyberpunk. But as far as the differences between sci-fi and cyberpunk, cyberpunk is a type of sci-fi, is in the sci-fi genre, but is a subgenre. Sci-fi overall is anything that has a focus on, it's a fictional setting that is focused on science, and that has a huge focus on science and technology present within it. So, like, again, Star Wars still would count, uh, even if the Force is seen as more magical and stuff, because it's more explained as something kind of like psionics. And then there's still also the matter of there's a ton of science-based tech in their world, and explanations of how it works alternative to the reality of our own. A lot of generic fantasy stuff also can fall into the sci-fi genre to some degree. Um, then likewise, Frankenstein's monster was one of the earliest examples of sci-fi because, again, it's the idea of using science to create fiction, and that there's a scientific explanation for making fictional events happen rather than just hand waving it. And yeah, Star Wars did even do that with their own whole quote unquote magic system with the midichlorians. And then they later, actually, I would argue that they actually kind of successfully retconned that a little bit by explaining more like, this is one of the more positive notes of the newer trilogy. They did something where they explained that, hey, the midichlorians are just kind of a symptom. It's not necessarily what causes the force or anything. It's just a possible explanation or a possible indicator that somebody might be force sensitive. So it was like the midichlorian thing was very stupid, but I will give credit to the new trilogy that they did manage to address that a little bit. Cyberpunk probably, yeah, doesn't need to have, well, it doesn't need to have interstellar travel. It can, But overall, I would say that this basically the cyberpunk overall its focuses are usually going to be more on like um individualism and like how that relates to like essentially corporate wage slaving and stuff like that. How much of you do you actually own, especially when you're factoring in um, components and augmentations and stuff and parts? Like that is a huge element of cyberpunk and stuff, and that is a big difference between that and a lot of other genres that just feature cybernetics. In cyberpunk, when you're introducing those cybernetics, there's sometimes the concept of ownership that is introduced, or just the process of acquiring them and what they mean for you specifically. And there's a lot more of an intimate relationship there. And like, hey, if you're getting all these parts from this company, maybe they don't claim ownership of those parts on you, but they claim an ownership of the drugs that you need to stay alive. And so it kind of basically starts being erosion of your personal freedoms and your own rights and your own individuality as this company starts to slowly and steadily acquire more and more of you. Or there's other forces at play that kind of conflict with that, where like maybe like you start getting like they have the whole thing of cyberpsychosis and stuff in cyberpunk and the game itself and things like that. uh Cowboy Bebop absolutely would be cyberpunk. Sword Art Online has some undertones of cyberpunk, but it's not really a cyberpunk setting. um Not in the same way that the Matrix is. You can have Nor and Western in a cyberpunk setting, though. Do you think you'll ever continue the PVO2 comic? Not as a comic. Yeah, actually, Bioshock, actually, come to think of it, is a version of is actually kind of a cyberpunk game. Uh, Cyberpunk the tabletop cyberpunk is actually very different from D&D. For one, most of your checks are actually done with a D10 rather than a D20, and again, you still have your DVs that you have to try and hit, um, difficulty values. Um, but it's a lot easier to actually kind of get started, from what I've read. I haven't played Cyberpunk Red yet, but I'm planning to run it sometime soon. And I don't know. I haven't played Cyberpunk Red yet. I'm still getting into it. I'm not going to spoil anything or get anybody's hopes up, moreover, because I don't even know what I'm really going to do. I just know that comics are not fun. Plus, I also am kind of in a rock and a hard place, because I think that if I were to do a PV202 animated series, people who want Hero 3 would freak out, and if I were to do Hero 3, people who want PV02 would freak out, and I just can't win. See assault. Anyway, let's stop asking about if arbitrary IP is cyberpunk. I've given you guys the tools to assess this yourself. You guys can determine it yourself. Um, let's talk more about this stuff though, because some of the stuff with One D&D that starting to get into the more controversial part of it. One of them was basically they introduced guaranteed success and guaranteed failure on a Nat 1 and Nat 20. Um, so that is one change that I think most people would play with at base. I'm personally not too much a fan of it, just because I think like if you have enough bonuses to meet the roll even on Nat 1, you should still be able to meet the roll, but it's whatever. Critical hit. This was retconned in the next pack, but they basically changed one thing. They changed one thing where basically critical hits were going to be, it only doubles a weapons dice, and that's it, which makes your critical hits feel very, very flimsy, which kind of would suck, because it doesn't modify anything else. Like, why does it increase your strength modifier and things like that? If it's gonna just play like that, it's very weak. I was initially like wanting to see what they would do with that, because like in my opinion something like this would actually allow them to introduce a system where it's like, hey, different classes, when they get critical hits, they have different effects that go off, such as for instance when the paladin, like they could make it where when the paladin smites on a crit, it maximizes all of his die. When a rogue gets a critical hit, they get to double their dice as normal or something, or just their sneak attack die. Like the idea would basically be give a means for there to be a way to capitalize on critical hits, I guess. So one other thing that's also interesting is the concept of spells or spell schools. You have arcane, primal, and divine. And I'm actually not against that concept at base. That's actually what Pathfinder 2 does, for instance, where you have occult, divine, primal, and arcane. And then different classes get access to different spell schools. Even some subclasses sometimes get different ones. Like in Pathfinder 2, you can have a sorcerer that is of any 4 of the different magic schools. Same thing goes for witches. Wizards are always arcane, however, and clerics are always divine. So it kind of makes for an interesting character choice when it is a choice available. But in 5e, you don't have that choice, and well, there's something that I'll get to in a minute. Which actually, let's go over to the next document. So what I kind of have the issue with is overall, the class features are a lot simpler, or they've shrunk them down a lot. Specifically, I want to look at the Ranger, because look at how few features the Ranger gets. Their unique features, they get one at level 1, and then the next one that is a general feature that all Rangers get is not till level 7. And the features that they get include Hunter's Mark, which is strong but not very flavorful, and Roving, which is good, or it's alright. Here it is. Roving, you basically get a move speed buff, and you get climb speed and swim speed, which I feel like this part, very least, should be like a level 1 feature or a level 3 feature or something. Rangers overall, they are better mechanically, but they are worse thematically, significantly, I would say. Like, and here's the thing that I have an issue with also. If this is an example of what they're planning to do to simplify characters, then that is very worrying for the other casters, because there's not going to be a whole lot of difference then between a bard, a warlock, a wizard, and a sorcerer. All of them are going to be almost the same because they have so few class features, and they all have the exact same spell list. All of them have ritual casting, and it just doesn't feel good. Yeah, and that's also another thing. Rangers originally were a fighter subclass in AD&D. This feels more like a fighter subclass here. You get a bit of magic, and then you also get favorite enemy. Those are the two key things that feel like they're the only distinct thing from a fighter. The fact also that they don't get their next unique option until level 7, you're going 6 levels without getting anything unique other than, hey, you basically get Hex. Which I almost imagine that they're going to make Hex into a warlock feature, which is gonna suck. Hex isn't even that good. Like, Hunter's Mark isn't even really that good, all things considered. But I don't know. I think they should introduce something at like level 3 that basically gives you some kind of... They're afraid to put in too many features of this thing. They want to simplify things heavily. So they've cut out as much as they can and have just made generic things like expertise, generic feat, extra attack, fighting style. These are all generic things that many classes can get access to. And yeah, that's the thing. They could put Ranger in as a fighter subclass, and it would make no difference whatsoever. But yeah, I am not a fan of this Ranger. Again, it is better, so it is a bit of an improvement from base Ranger, but it's the other thing that also bugs me: fighting style. This is kind of a more of a minor gripe, but I still this. So they get access to archery, defense, or two-weapon fighting. They no longer get access to duelist, and I don't understand really why, because it's like the archetypal ranger is going to be somebody from Lord of the Rings. It is not going to be Legolas, who uses two swords and a bow. It's actually going to be Aragorn, who uses a two-handed sword, because he is literally the ranger. That is what he is referred to in the books and in the movies. And he's somebody who uses spells. He's a tracker. Like, he's everything a ranger would be. And he's like, you can't play that, or play that effectively, I suppose, using the rules as written here. And it's just kind of iffy. The thing is, ranger doesn't mean ranged user. Ranger means somebody who's basically like a steward of the forest and stuff. Think about like a forest ranger and stuff like that up at the national parks and stuff. Like, they should be able to be ranged, but that shouldn't be the only thing they can be. And that seems to be what they want here, is they want them to either be only be ranged, or they want them to be like that one really bad example of how to write a character who was like the drow, who was a good drow, and he was a dual weapon warrior and stuff like that. In my opinion, what 5e should maybe consider doing for ranger is give them some kind of trait that allows them to not only like track things better, but also like know more about their enemy, and give them a means for a personal way to bypass resistances and stuff like that. Or like relentlessly pursue a target and stuff. Like, make it like, let's actually go to Pathfinder 2, because Pathfinder 2 actually has the best ranger in any tabletop system that I've played. Let me pull that up. It's range penalty. I want ranger. So let's pull this up here. So the thing with their ranger, there's a lot of text here, but I can go over a lot of this. The key thing with ranger that they get is they get something called the Hunter's Edge. First off, rangers in this system don't require wisdom. They can use wisdom for their spells and stuff if they choose to get spells. They don't need to have spells, however. Spells are an option that they can take, and they get them through feats, class feats specifically, so they're a choice. And then their focus spells include things such as Gravity Weapon, healing your companion if you have like an animal companion, Magical Hide to buff them up, Snare Hopping, stuff like that. They have a small spell list, but they're really good spells, and they can use them every single combat. The other thing that I like about Rangers a lot is they have their own kind of version of Hunter's Mark, but it's something that makes more sense for them. So they have 3 options that they can choose from, and once they choose one, they're locked in. A Flurrier Ranger is for the archetypal, hey, I'm a 2-sword wielding ranger, or I'm a rapid shooter ranger and stuff, and I just hammer this target repeatedly. The idea behind it is they mark a target as their first action, and then all other attacks against that target, they take a smaller multiple attack penalty. Like, basically that allows them to become one of the best single target attackers in the game. And it's kind of interesting because this makes them distinct from the fighter. The fighter basically gets all of its damage from being very accurate and reliably hitting, whereas the ranger gets all their damage from volume, at least if they're a flurry ranger. They also have precision, which instead of attacking many times, it makes it so that way you hit once and it gets a bonus to its damage and stuff like that. And then they also have Outwit, which is an amazing support ability, which is super thematic for the ranger, where whenever basically they try to learn something about their target, they can grant their allies a bonus whenever they succeed. So they basically become your bestiary, and they're great at tracking things as a result. Pathfinder 2 Rangers, they also can be just as effective with a heavy weapon, a melee weapon, bow and arrow, crossbow, etc. Like they have a whole bunch of different things. So like going through some of the feats, crossbow ace, they can take that. This gives them basically a bonus to their crossbow damage and stuff whenever they reload. So it makes up for the fact that crossbows don't have like a fixed damage going into them. Gravity weapon makes their single hits hit harder. They have hunted shot, which is basically an opener for bow rangers. You can go with options that allow you to specialize in heavy weapons. You have twin takedown, which is meant for like dual wielding melee weapons, so they can just get in there and attack twice for one action. It's all really cool stuff, and it's all super thematic that feels like it fits. And then they also have feats that they can take instead that are like, hey, you get access to an animal companion, or you get access to magic and stuff like that. And it's like, it's all a choice. Then meanwhile, in 5e, you're playing a ranger. Well, you're using a bow and arrow, or you're using two swords. Those are your options. It's very homogenous, and there's not really much choice involved. But yeah, I'm really not a fan of how they're handling Ranger in One D&D. And the problem I have overall is like, this is all playtest material, so this isn't going to be final, and I'm hoping that they change it. But it's still not encouraging because this is showing what their mentality is going forwards. And I don't like that because it kind of implies that things are going to be a lot more homogenous in 1D&D, and it's not encouraging. It's also kind of weird that Ranger actually gets most of its like identifying features in this once they hit level 11 and beyond. Comparison, Bard. Take a look at them. They get Bardic Inspiration, that's a staple. Songs of Restoration. Jack of all trades. They get improvement to their font, so increasing something previously, but they get a lot of their core things here, and then they really start getting, it really starts ramping up at level 11 with Magical Secrets, but still they've gotten most of their features by level 10. Ranger's only gotten 2 of them. And then likewise with Rogue. Scroll down to that. So much scrolling. Yeah, they get Sneak Attack, Thieves Can't, which is kind of meh. They get the Sneak Attack, which is important because it's also increasing constantly. They get Uncanny Dodge, which is kind of a mediocre feature, but it's something. They get Evasion, which is a very staple feature for Rogue. And then Reliable Talent at level 11 and stuff. So they've still gotten more before than say, the Ranger. The other thing that I also really don't like, they've replaced the level 20 options with epic boon feats, which are very powerful feats, so they say. Except when we look at them, let me just pull them up. Epic boon of combat prowess. When you melee attack, you can turn a miss into a hit. You can do this once per initiative. Dimensional travel. You can misty step once per initiative. Energy resistance. Whenever you long rest, you can choose a energy type to gain resistance to. Fortitude, you increase your maximum hit points. These are all like very basic changes that aren't really that significant. Like, well, they might be significant. They have a mechanical impact for sure, but that's literally it. They don't have any thematic element to them really, and I don't like that. Like, as boring as it was, a fighter being able to attack 4 times in a turn was kind of cool. These aren't legendary actions at all, no. These are just strictly mechanical buffs. But I liked the idea of, like, hey, fighter gets an additional attack. It's not the most interesting thing, but it's something that's unique to them. I like the idea of the barbarian getting a huge increase to its physical stats. I really liked the paladin, how it got a level 20 feature based on its subclass, because that allowed its subclass to choose a feature that is super, super thematic. Like, I can't remember the oath, but it's the basic one. That one allows you to basically literally turn into a goddamn angel, which is so cool. Rogues was kind of boring, and it's literally been turned into a generic feat. The Boon of Combat Prowess. You turn a miss into a hit. Boon of Luck. This is a really obnoxious one. Like, obnoxious just because of how weak it is. Turn a d20 test and add a d10 to the roll. Cool. It's Bardic Inspiration, but only for you. Dim light or darkness, you can become invisible as an action. This is literally just a warlock invocation. And here's the problem with the thing with Homebrew. 5e overall, like, I don't really like the idea of putting the onus on DMs and stuff to always have to homebrew stuff, because homebrew is fun, but all too often homebrew is being, god damn it, where do they keep fucking coming from? Let me see if I have any options that I can... The thing that I really wish is, what was I saying? Goddamn spam bots. Oh, originally what Ranger got was when you hit your favorite foe, you do damage based on your wisdom modifier, which kind of sucked, because that should have been something that was given way earlier. I don't think I can make it a subscriber only. Or maybe, let me see here. Stream settings. Yeah, I can't make it subscriber only, I don't think. I'm not really going to talk about movie theater stuff right now because talking about D&D stuff. I'm not going to change the topic. But the thing with homebrew overall is like, I don't like having to constantly have to come up with rules to cover the blind spots that 5e has. Because 5e has a lot of blind spots, and I wish that I could focus more on, like, if I'm going to homebrew stuff, I would rather it be stuff to make my life easier rather than to try and make up for stuff that D&D is missing. And that's the rub, usually. Like, here's some other boons and stuff. Bonus action, you can regain hit die once per long rest. Oh wait, no, this is actually a lot stronger. Bonus action, you can recover half your HP per long rest, which is this is actually, this is strong. It's a little bit more interesting for very, very, very specific character types. Boon of speed, very boring, just 30-foot increase. Skill proficiency, very boring, just all skill proficiencies. These aren't, like... I wish these were better. Or more interesting. Yeah, you're level 20, and it's like... Some of these are kind of hit or miss, but none of them really, like... They're so generic, is the problem. Like, I'd rather see something like... Hey, I would rather see something like a expert-based thing, and like maybe the requirement is you have a certain charisma score to take it, rather than being a prerequisite group, and make it like, hey, you're basically able to change your appearance. You can cast Alter Self on yourself at will, and it does not require concentration. You can dispel it at will. So you basically become like a shapeshifter kind of thing, and then also just give you a universal agnostic advantage on all deception checks and performance checks to impersonate somebody else. Like, make you into basically like a changeling or something. I guess, though, they kind of want things that are more combat-oriented. You could also throw in something in there like, hey, when you take damage, you can alter yourself to basically give yourself resistance to any further forms of that damage type. Uh, and it's not so much that it's broken. Coffee Lock has issues because if you're not sleeping, you're not getting long rests, and your character will start taking on exhaustion. So that was introduced in Xanathar's Guide, which is the same book where the Coffee Lock was made possible. So if you're using the Coffee Lock rules, but you're not using those exhaustion rules, then you're kind of being selective and you're picking and choosing. Cleric isn't broken, it's just strong. The Sentinel and Polar Master thing, it's not so much broken as it is very, very annoying for the DM, and it's kind of thematically awkward sometimes. Like, it makes sense to stop a character that is your size. But then when you have a dragon, a gargantuan-sized dragon, try to take off from the ground, and you attack them, and then they can't fly, and they are literally 18 times your size. Why? Multiclassing can get broken, namely just because some classes and subclasses are front-loaded with features. Multiclassing into Hexblade is very much a Munchkin move, for instance. Warforged, however, are, again, not exactly broken, they're just strong. And I don't think there's anything wrong with things being strong. And yeah, that is largely one thing that's more of a shift just because of what a lot of players kind of are expecting out of D&D. Things have become a lot more combat-oriented, which it's kind of weird then for me to kind of like shill Pathfinder 2, because that's also a combat-heavy system, but at least there the combat is pretty nice. I don't think Warforged are immune to exhaustion. Let me look that up. Yeah, nothing about Warforged says that they are immune to exhaustion. What they have is they have advantage on saving throws against poisoned and resistance to poison damage. They don't need to eat, drink, or breathe, and they're immune to disease and don't need to sleep. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't go without a long rest. That just means that they don't need to actually go through the process of sleeping. So they would probably need to still long rest and stuff. Like, the way that I would flavor it would basically be them having to do maintenance on themselves just to keep themselves functional. But they can still get exhaustion. The thing that's more strong with Warforged is just the fact that they get an agnostic +1 to armor class as long as they're wearing armor. Like, the AC bonus is a lot stronger, and people kind of underestimate how... There's a reason why it's so hard to get magic armor bonuses, because magic armor is super strong. And an armor bonus, like, because of the bounded accuracy, it's very, very clunky for 5e. On the note of the quote-unquote bastard combo, by the way, going through the feats, things kind of got a little bit worse, because I like the idea that they've done here of making every single feat, or every single bigger feat, a half feat, so everything gives you an increase. However, Polar Master and Sentinel are still completely unchanged, so they got net buffed, and now they're even better. You can still do the bonus action strike, and you can still attack when something enters your threat, and then Sentinel still allows you to stop them. I really think Sentinel should have a size limit on it, where, like, if you opportunity attack them, if they are no more than one size bigger than you, then you stop them, but if they're bigger than you, or if they're much bigger than you, then maybe you just reduce their movement. Also, Rage Bear, I kind of like that combo, because, well, it is kind of annoying. Like, as a DM, you can also just start introducing magical enemies to start chipping away their health faster. But also, I don't know, I don't think it's really that busted, because, like, the Bear Druid still has the issue of, hey, they're still just using a bear stat block, so they're not hitting very accurately. Let me pull up my muted words list and see if I can't get rid of these bots. Let's see here. Studio. Settings. Give me a sec. Community. Locked words. Let's see. Name is Chat69. Let's see if that stops it. Why do people keep fucking asking about Hero the Dense? Like, I've answered this question so many times. Just go watch one of my other responses on this topic from one of the many times that I've responded. Anyway, yeah, overall, with these feats and stuff, Monk hasn't been seen yet. Monk is in the fighter subgroup, in the warrior subgroup, so they'll probably be next. I'm imagining they're going to show the physicals before they show the casters. But yeah, right here you can see Barbarian, Fighter, and Monk will... Honestly, I almost feel like Monk should be in the Expert group and Ranger should be in the Warrior group, but they wanted to make the Ranger feel different from the Fighter, arbitrarily. Yeah. Monk is weird because people think monks... Like, people who haven't played D&D very long think that monks are incredibly powerful. That's usually because they've only gone up to, like, level 7 at most. Beyond that, they start falling off a lot, because they have the opposite issue of Rangers in this group here. Because while Rangers don't get any really unique features until level 11, Monks have gotten all their unique helpful features by level 11. And then beyond that, everything they get is all flavor. I'm of the camp that a turtle should be able to live for 250 years on average. Give them the same longevity as a tortoise. Hello, Trico. We're talking about D&D stuff and tabletop stuff as a whole. I'm kind of griping about 5e. Away. But yeah, Monk hasn't seen any change. We haven't seen what the changes to Monk are yet. They've only introduced 3 of the 12 classes. And yeah, the thing is, Legendary Stunning Strike is literally built to chew through legendary resistances. It's one of the best ways to get rid of them. Unfortunately, that it's also a really good option overall, but it's something that you want to coordinate with your party. Because I think legendary resistances overall are actually a good thing, because it's so easy to shut down a character in 5e and just completely mosh a boss because of action economy. It's very hard for 5e to handle the whole big boss type enemy and make it a one versus the party kind of thing. You need to give them like padding and stuff in the action economy, and legendary resistance and legendary actions are some of the only ways to handle that. Yeah. The key, honestly, what I would say would be like one good change I would say would be by level 11, if they start combat and they have an amount of key less than their proficiency bonus, give them key back equal to their proficiency bonus. Or give them an ability that allows them to channel themselves and restore ki directly in the middle of a battle and stuff as an action. It's not all their ki, but they restore a chunk of it. Like, I think that would be a neat change. The other things as well is like, oh, there is actually something that I think is largely a positive change. They're moving bonus action attacks into just the attack action itself, and I like that change overall. I'd imagine that monks are probably going to get the same treatment. They're probably going to be able to, when they flurry of blows, just do that all as part of the attack action, get 2 additional unarmed strikes. I think that would be a good change for them. That would be a nice buff for them because it would free up their bonus action to do other key actions. So now they can Step of the Wind or Dodge as a bonus action. The only thing is that those aren't very good uses because the rogue can already do those for free. But I don't know about those. I feel like they should get more out of it if they're spending key. But I'm just more hoping that, like, when they introduce monks, that they kind of give them options that scale a little bit better into late game as well. Bard overall got a lot of love. It's mostly unaffected, which is better than what the Ranger can say. It still has its thematic abilities. It still has the Song of Restoration, which is... it's a cute ability. Still has Expertise, as usual. Still has Bardic Inspiration, as usual. Let's see actually what Inspiration does, because they might have allowed you to do more with it. Oh yeah, they buffed it. You can use your Bardic Inspiration to heal things now. They've kind of... one thing that is a little weird is they've kind of pushed bards into the healer role. Which I feel like that should be... like, they even get healing abilities like Healing Word and stuff as innate spells that they just know, even though they're arcane. So they have a very, very big spell list. Magical Secrets kind of actually got nerfed because of the homogenization of the classes, or of the spell schools. So now they don't have as many choices that are unique because they already can... like, a bard can already take Fireball because they're on the arcane school. So you no longer have to get Magical Secrets to get Fireball. But overall, they still are in a pretty good spot. Like, you can still make basically the exact same bard as you did before, have all the same features, except now you can also heal more, and you get a few bonus spells. Inspiration, as I mentioned. Oh, here's another thing. They, instead of just giving a creature... looks like they're actually trying to get rid of bonus actions, come to think of it. I don't think I've seen it mentioned anywhere. Or no, I have seen it mentioned a few times. But the Bard's Inspiration is instead given as a reaction whenever something rolls a check, rather than given as a bonus action thing that they can choose to use. So that guarantees that the Bard will be able to see their Inspiration used more, but it also is eating up their reaction. So that does free up their bonus action, though. So if you're a Sword Dance Bard... oh, does it say that? It doesn't say that anywhere. Yeah, I don't see anything in here that says they can't take the evocation skill, or school. Wait, here we go. Spellcasting. Whenever you finish Lord, place any skill with a... oh, yeah, it says right here. Arcane spell from the divination, enchantment, illusion, or transmutation. Okay, yeah, that is true. So they cannot take Fireball. Interesting. So that is so that restricts that there. Magical Secrets. Oh, wow. So yeah, they did get nerfed in Magical Secrets. Let's see. Damn. That is a pretty bad nerf. Yeah, they can't take Fireball or destructive spells and stuff from their class. If they get them from other sources, they can take them. So, like, if you have a cantrip that you get as a certain race, you can still use that. But yeah, that actually is a pretty bad nerf. Otherwise, though, there is a shift more to them being healers, which I think is largely fine. This won't affect every single bard naturally. Like the bard that I'm currently playing, a Warforged bard, he could actually switch over to these rules and he'd be fine. He'd play basically the exact same, except that now he'd also be able to heal with his Inspiration. And yeah, I was saying that earlier. Ranger should take inspiration from PF2, but I think already people are kind of a little bit suspicious of them ripping off PF2 because, like, funny story, the D&D movie, they basically had a poster that was revealed, and one of the things that were shown on it was an intellect devourer, except they used the art from Pathfinder. The intellect devourer was put under the Open Games license from 3.5, so anybody can use the concept, but they specifically use the art of their competitor. That's like if, basically, like, it's like, imagine, like, some company draws a dragon, and then their competitor uses that dragon to advertise their own dragon. It's kind of funny and pathetic. Yeah, you can still make damage bards with nerfs and stuff, especially because you can use still your weapon skills. They still are decent with that. They only have access to simple weapons. This is another thing I don't like. They're not listing specific weapons anymore. They're only listing whole weapon groups. I think Bard should still get access to a rapier. Like, give him that. Crossbow is fine, but give him a rapier. That said, I think from the implication, they're changing it so short swords are now simple weapons. That's just a speculation on my part. Rogues actually also got another buff in that respect. They got martial weapons with the finesse property specifically, which means that now they have access to whips as well, which I think that's actually pretty cool. I think rogues are good, but they weren't ever, like, broken or anything, and I think a whip rogue is kind of thematically cool. It's not a lot of damage, so not a lot of players might not take it, but those who know with, like, hey, it's the reach option, it's cool. I think that's a good change. But the thing that I'm pointing out is that short sword is listed here. Or, let me see. It's listed somewhere. I think it might have been in the Bard's equipment. Yeah, see right here. Bards get access to a short sword. Why would they get access to a weapon that they're not proficient with? So I think they're actually going to be making the short sword a simple weapon. Hello, Jose. And yeah, Paizo has ported some of their Pathfinder stories to 5e, which I think that's completely fine. Kingmaker is being ported to Pathfinder 2 and 5e both, and I'm interested to see what the differences will be. I have a feeling it will probably play out better in Pathfinder 2, because Paizo makes hard encounters, and I don't think they have as much of a grasp on the balance of 5e as they do with their own system. Actually, going back to Pathfinder and stuff, one thing I don't like how the weapons are handled in 5e as a whole because they're just so simple. I do like how Pathfinder 2 has made every single weapon have, like, unique traits and stuff. What? Why? Oh, siege weapons, I see. So, like, for instance, scrolling down, like a stiletto pen. This is a special kind of dagger. It has, like, a concealable trait, and it also has the agile trait. It's thrown, so it's a lot like a similar normal dagger, except the conceal means that you get a bonus whenever you try to hide it. It's uncommon, so you can't take it unless you have a special reason to. Let's see. Great pick. This is basically just a two-handed war pick, but it has the fatal property, so whenever you get a critical hit, it's extra deadly. And that's neat. The pistols, in particular, also have that, and it's just cool. They have, like, these little small traits that are, like, interesting. Disarm means, like, hey, when you can use this weapon to try and disarm your opponent, even if you don't have a hand free. So, like, you don't have to drop your weapon, because, like, the idea is basically when you try to disarm somebody, you block their attack with your weapon, and then you try to grab it with your other hand, and then you try to wrench it from their hand. Rapier allows you to instead twist the sword around and try to remove the weapon from their hand that way. Whips and stuff also have a similar trait, usually with disarm, as well as trip, which allows you to use the weapon's range to trip and disarm people, as well as get your weapon's bonus to the checks on that. I just really like the weapon properties because they're small, but they're interesting. They're more granular. Some of them are a little bit more situational, which can be annoying, but overall they make things feel unique. Um, I do kind of wish that 5e had some weapon properties that made things feel a little bit more distinct, even if it was just more variants of like, hey, this weapon is similar to this weapon, it just deals a different damage type. Like they have 3 different heavy two-handed reach weapons that all do the exact same damage type and the exact same properties, like even down to their cost. And it's just kind of monotonous and repetitive. Pathfinder 2, the issues I have with Pathfinder 2, early levels are incredibly rough in Pathfinder 2. Paizo also isn't very good at balancing their early levels usually. There's also a lot of what I consider to be action taxes in Pathfinder 2. It has a 3-action system, which is phenomenal, but a lot of things that you would take for granted in other systems, you can't just freely do in Pathfinder 2. Like, if you want to change your grip on your weapon and wield it from one hand into 2 hands, that requires an action, something that you have to, like, plan for. You want to draw your weapon, that requires an action. You want to use your shield and gain its armor bonus, you have to raise it as an action. There's just a lot of costs, and so you have to build around that and be very conscious of that, because if you're not, it's going to be very rough for you. ISO is also kind of a little bit... Keep in mind as well, Blasey, that when you raise a shield, you also gain the action to reduce damage that you take. So you can actually actively block with the shield rather than just get the armor bonus. So you get the armor bonus while it's raised, and then if something still hits you, you can use your reaction and absorb the damage into your shield. And then you only take part of the damage. So you do get something out of it. And there's also some abilities that allow you to raise it like freely, like attack and then immediately raise with a shield. But yeah, the other things with Pathfinder 2 that are kind of a little bit of an issue is they are still very concerned about like balance, so they're afraid about giving some options. Like forcibly moving a character is very hard to do in Pathfinder 2, and they don't actually even give you rules for dragging and grabbing things. Like grappling only lasts for 1 turn. Yeah, so that's the idea. Is a lot of those actions and stuff that are action taxes, you have to work them in with a multiple attack penalty, because you basically can attack as many times as you have actions for, but every single time you attack, you take a penalty to it. -5 or -4 if it's like an agile weapon. And then bonuses, the penalty is based on what attack number it is and what weapon type it is, not the type of attacks that you've taken before. So, like if you attack with a heavy weapon, and then a light weapon, that light weapon is still going to be at a -8 rather than a -10 or a -9. But yeah, the taxes you still have to be conscious of, because it's not good to spam just constant attacks, because you're likely going to miss, or get even worse, a critical miss, which sometimes means enemies can capitalize on that. Grappling overall in like grappling and movement and forced movement in Pathfinder 2 is kind of not really handled at all. They try not to mention it at all. They have dragging rules, but that's for objects. But it's weird then, because there's been official playthroughs like that have been streamed by the staff, where they've had like scorpions that have attacked and stunned a character and then dragged them off to their burrow. And like, so they're obviously, the designers think that characters should be able to be dragged some way, but they don't explain it in the rules at all. And so, like, me and my table, we've come, like, usually when it comes to making homebrew, I've just going back to 5e really quick. 5e homebrew often features a lot of content stuff to try and introduce, well, it's going to be a huge grab bag of stuff. It's going to be content stuff. It's going to be rules overhauls, because 5e doesn't have rules for a lot of systems. Whereas in Pathfinder 2, usually it's going to be content stuff, and sometimes, in some few cases, it's going to be very, very small rules homebrew, because the rules themselves are pretty tight otherwise. Like, we've had adjustments to the rules for disarming at my tables, as well as adjustments for grabbing and dragging. But that's really about it as far as rules go. Everything else that my table has really used as homebrew has been just content-based. And, like, because somebody asked earlier, Pathfinder 2 is amazing on character customization. Like, even if you have two characters of the same class, chances are they're going to be pretty distinct from one another, or they can be at least. There might be some quote-unquote optimal plays, but there's also a lot of viable plays, and sadly there's also a lot of trap plays where they're just not very good and kind of don't feel satisfying to use. So it's kind of... that is one thing that is a little frustrating, is that they have trap feats that just nobody in the right mind should ever take. Because, like, it's a bonus that's too situational, isn't thematic, isn't powerful, etc. Alchemist kind of got it a little bit rough on that. Like, they have a alchemical crafting feat that they can take, and it's bad. Like, there's no reason to take it. Chances are you're probably playing a bomb alchemist as well, because they're the only ones that actually do a reliably in combat. And so you're going to be taking quick lobs, so you can throw bombs without having to pull them out first. Like, that's one thing. Other thing with, like, alchemists, they feel the feat taxes a lot because they have to use an action to take out their items before they use them. And they're an item-based class. They literally are all about crafting items and using those instead of spells. I need to refill my water really quick. I will be right back. All right, I'm back. Just had to refill my water. So yeah, the Alchemist got a little bit shafted. Part of it as well in Pathfinder 2 is they also got shafted because in Pathfinder 1, they were really strong because, again, they're targeting touch AC, they're doing a reliable source of damage, and they're doing it to multiple targets, and it's really good damage too. In Pathfinder 2, they are much more of a support character. Like, the Alchemist is actually really strong if you know what you're doing, but holy crap, it requires a lot of knowing, a lot of understanding. I've played a toxicologist, and generally, instead of poisoning targets directly, it was better for me to put my poison on the rangers' daggers and stuff because they were able to attack so many times, they could guarantee that they would get that hit off, and then they would be able to use my poison save DCs and try to get some extra damage in there. I'm pretty sure that they do have a dragon transformation in Pathfinder 2. I know they have that in Pathfinder 1. Like, they literally have draconic transformation and then polymorph, which allows you to transform into dragons as well. So it's with a little bit more limited rules. Actually, no, polymorph doesn't let you do dragons, but there is a dragon polymorph spell. 3 of them, actually, for 3 different types of dragons. And yeah, hopefully the treasure rule book introduces some new crafting stuff that boosts up the alchemist. The issue is more that crafting is something that anybody can do in Pathfinder 2, and really the problem isn't so much crafting the items, it's more like, it would be nice to have better rules so that way you can capitalize on that more for characters that focus on that, but it would also be nice to have and also be able to craft on the go. But it would also be nice for the alchemist to just have some tools that help them balance out their actions more, so that way they can use stuff more reliably. Like, I would like to see, for mutagenesis, I would like to see some kind of auto injector where, as a reaction to anything, or like maybe a reaction to rolling initiative, they can choose to inject themselves with this injector that's like just strapped on their body, and it just automatically activates when they roll initiative and immediately injects them with a mutagen. And yeah, Pathfinder 5e already has a lot of rules for a system. Pathfinder 2 is no different, and actually has more rules. But some other things that also are kind of neat with, or not necessarily neat. One of the things, it's actually more of a problem, small problem. Pathfinder 2, it's intimidating to look at, because I'm going to just pull up one of the classes here. Go to character creation, classes. Let's just look at Barbarian. By the way, one thing that Pathfinder 2 does have going for it is all their stuff is available for free to view at 2e.aeonprd.com. This is officially supported. Has the blessings of Paizo. It's basically their open games license rules and stuff. So if you want to experiment and like see what options are available, you can look at it here, and then you can choose to buy the books, which if you like what you see and you like playing it and stuff, I would recommend buying the books. But going through here, so looking at all these options here, first level, we've got the ancestry and background. That's not really a feature. That's part of character creation. Initial proficiencies, that is a little bit something you have to account for. Rage, that's a feature. Instinct, that's a feature. Specifically, it's your subclass. And then a barbarian feat, which is a custom feature. Then level 2, you get a custom feature from your class, and then a skill feat. So these are generic, these are fairly generic things. It's a class feat and a skill feat, but it's still a lot at character creation, because you have your ancestry to select, which, as I mentioned, that also includes your heritage as well as your ancestry feat. You have your background, which includes the background feat from that. Your initial proficiencies, which you have to select those, which you have to do that for every character in every game. You have Rage, which is your core class feature. Instinct, which is your subclass. So you're making all these changes very early on. So as a result, character creation for Pathfinder 2 can be a little bit heavy, but once you've got it down, and once you've got your character made, leveling up is actually very easy, because the next level, you just take a feat, or you take 2 feats, that's it. Your skills go up by 1, but you can auto-calculate that if you have like a calculator or something. Next level, you get a new unique feature, and then you also just get a general feat, so you can choose from the general feat list, as well as the skill feat, as well as another skill point to spend. And then, like, leveling up is fairly easy, and every other level, you're getting a new unique class feature that you get to choose out. And really more of the mastery of the system comes from understanding what these feat options are. And unlike previous editions where you had to sort through like 700, like 1,500 feats, this one, the feats are bucketed into these pools. So you have your class feats, you have skill feats, and then you have general feats, which also include skill feats, and then you also have ancestry feats. So you're not looking at every single feat every single time you level up. You're only looking at feats that are available at your current level and for your current class. And it makes it a lot easier to customize. Yeah, the only thing that I would really worry about when looking at the feat section for class feats, only look at the first level or two and see if there's anything that also has like a feat tree requirement. Like there will be some feats and stuff where it's like, hey, you need to be a certain instinct, like the spirit instinct, or you need to have a previous feat. There's just a lot of choices that you have to make, and some people like that, some people get overwhelmed, but overall, it's nice to have the options, basically. Some cool stuff as well. The instincts, I really like how they did the subclasses for all the classes that have them. The instinct for the barbarian is fun because you basically get access to you basically get to emulate certain animal attacks. Like if you are I don't know if you actually partially transform into these or if it's just kind of like you emulating them. But like literally you can be a frog instinct and you can get a tongue attack. It's so weird. Which that makes more sense if you're like a Gripply or something. But they also have these traits on them, like the grapple trait means that when you grapple seems a little bit redundant for a fist weapon, because I mean it's a fist, you should already be able to grapple with it. But what this means is that whenever you take the grapple action, if you have like the hand wraps of mighty blows, it means that you get to add your weapons bonus to your grapple checks. So it's a small trait that is kind of easy to miss. The anathema is basically just it's kind of like with the oaths with paladins and 5e and stuff. It's basically just a roleplay thing. But yeah, it's kind of, I like this overall because it gives you different ways to use your rage and different benefits for it. The damage that you get from raging varies depending on what instinct that you take. Like, one thing I really like here, Giant Instinct. Even if you're a small-sized creature, you're encouraged to use a large-size weapon, which is amazing. Like, that's cool. Running around as a tiny little goblin wearing a great axe bigger than he is. I love that. And they make it thematically appropriate. You can use it, but whenever you attack with it, you get clumsy because it's very unwieldy. But you're doing a lot of extra damage with it, and I like that. It's a better way to handle weapon sizes. Speaking of which, 5e, weapon sizes. I've vented about these before. God, I hate the weapon size rules in 5e. They feel very wishy-washy, and it doesn't look like they're going to change because heavy is mentioned several times in the expert document. But, so, the problem I have with weapon sizes is in 3.5 in Pathfinder, weapon sizes had scaling damage. So all weapons existed in all sizes, and they got stronger or weaker depending on how big they were. You could always use a weapon that was one size bigger than you. However, you would have an attack penalty when doing so. The issue is 5e didn't want to do tables and stuff, which I can understand, but they still wanted to enforce weapon size rules, so they introduced the heavy property to try and discourage players from using heavy weapons or large weapons on small characters. But then they didn't give any options for said small characters to compensate. And it doesn't make any sense because, like, as far as grappling goes, well, a small-sized character can fit through smaller obstacles and stuff. They are also more vulnerable to grappling, and they can't grapple as big of targets. They're already nerfed on that. And that already compensates for the fact that they can't reach that. They generally tend to have slower speeds than larger size races, so it's not like they have an advantage there. Like, they don't really get much of anything out of being small. And so, I don't like the concept of heavy requiring size. Like, if you're not going to give actual weapon size rules, then don't half-ass it. They technically do have weapon size rules, and it's from the DMG. A larger size weapon basically just increases its damage die. Zbashu had a video on this where he was talking about, hey, play a large Minotaur character using your own weapons, then kill a hill giant and use his club, and now you have a 2d8 weapon, and you break the action economy. And it's like, the damage that they do from that should be, like, the damage that the NPCs do from that, if that's going to be an issue, should just be based on them using it, not based on players. It's silly. But the thing that I have always thought, if heavy is going to be a property, instead just make it a strength requirement. That can be used to kind of curb some of the stronger options in the game, because admittedly, ranged weapons kind of dominate 5e because they get their flat modifier to damage, so you always basically can hit your target. Unless you get into melee range, then just don't get into melee range. But, like, basically, if they have a heavy requirement, like, say, heavy 12, you require 12 strength in order to wield this weapon properly without disadvantage. Suddenly you just require ranged units to put a few points into strength, so that way they can use that longbow, if they want to use a longbow, that is. And the problem is giving a check every single time they roll, that's just going to bog down combat. But yeah. On the note of pixies, funnily enough, character creation, I'm going to show you something. Let's scroll down. Behold, the sprite. You can play a sprite in Pathfinder 2 with base vanilla rules. Unlike in 5e, they are actually tiny size. You can actually play a tiny character. The way that their damage is explained, all their weapon attacks and strikes are considered magical, whether they are unarmed or weapons. So the reason why that little sprite is able to do as much damage as a normal human is because their weapon is souped up by their magical power. And so that kind of compensates and helps adjust for that. And like, they managed to, I just like how that's handled. Rules as written, here's a character concept that I've had. Playing a sprite, probably a sylph sprite, so he's kind of got it's versatile heritage, so he's kind of got the whole drifter wind kind of aspect going for it. Wears a cowboy hat, is a gunslinger, and has the feat corgi mount from his ancestry. So he rides a little corgi into battle, using a rifle and sniping off of its back. And then he speaks with a Texas accent. He goes by the name Quigley. And he knows Undercommon because he's from down under. Specifically a pixie sniper. Gunslinger sniper, specifically. What's really funny is that just going into some of the rules options just to kind of show how deep this can kind of get, because it gets complicated, admittedly. The corgi that you get is technically a familiar, not a mount, but you can use it as a mount. It's a small-sized creature. It has the scent ability, which counts against its ability as a normal, so you can give it one other ability. You can give it either a land speed boost, or you can give it independent, which these are familiars basically are that you can load them up with unique features, which give them special traits. So the idea would basically be you give it speed, so now you suddenly have a 40-foot move speed while riding on the back of your corgi. It just takes you one action and it can move you twice. Alternatively, you could give it an independent, and now it's able to move freely every single turn while you use all your 3 actions to shoot and reload. So you're able to move and reposition with your dog while also keeping your gun loaded at all times, because a rifle would take 2 actions to reload. So you would only be able to do like 1 shot, then reload. But being able to just do this over and over again and make that your loop on your turn order, that basically would be how you could get that off while still having mobility. It's just a cool little idea that, for a character concept that I've had. As far as frogs go, if you mean a familiar frog is completely an option that's available. Cecil, when I made her in Pathfinder 2, her familiar was actually a alchemically made spider frog. If you want to play a frog, there is, where is it? Ripley. Play these guys. They are under the Open Games license, I believe. Yeah, the thing with 5e that really bugs me is, like, there's not a lot of ways to, like... The way that they handle pets in 5e is really... Or not 5e, in Pathfinder, makes a lot of this possible. Pets are actually, like, fulfilling to use, and they don't feel like they bog down the action economy. You give up 1 action to get 2 actions from your pet. So your pet can attack twice or move and attack. Your pet can't do anything if you don't command them, but having to spend an action to command your pet would be terrible in another system like 5e, where it is currently, where you're having to give up an entire attack to command your pet, rather than, like... And as a result, that basically means you're reducing your action economy to give your pet action economy. Meanwhile, if you make it a bonus action, well, usually you kind of build your class around only needing to use one type of bonus action. And as a result, it winds up inflating the action economy arbitrarily. With Pathfinder 2, since it's a 3-action system, you're not getting significantly more actions from having a pet. And also you're not giving up significant actions from having a pet. But yes, you can play as a frog. Oh yeah, let's just go over some other cool stuff that they have in Pathfinder 2. Kinrasu, these guys are rad as hell. This is a player character. It is a weird golem made of wood and tree parts, and they grow. But they are completely sentient and sapient. And they're just wild. Like, I love Kinrasu, they're so cool. They have not only androids, as shown here, and yes, that is a gun. They originally debuted in Starfinder, but they also... Well, no, they actually debuted in Pathfinder 1, because they had a whole spaceship that crashed on Golarion in lore. But they not only have androids, but they also have outright automatons. Literal constructs. This is like a possible player character you can make. And 5e's now kind of gotten on board and has introduced similar ideas and stuff, which is neat. Unfortunately, what I've heard overall is that I've heard the new book, the one that was the space book, the Spelljammer book, kind of was a little bit disappointing because they didn't actually introduce any rules for like actual space combat. They just wanted you to like board the enemy ship, which, I mean, if you're a sci-fi buff at all or care about sci-fi, that's why would you do that? Come on, introduce ship combat, please. They have some crazy things. That's not what I'm thinking of. Where is it? Skeleton. Playable skeleton race. You can be a Skeleman. And what's really funny is that, oh wait, no, I guess... Let's actually see, skeleton heritages. I imagine that they have, oh yeah, here we go, compact skeleton. You can be a small skeleton. But yeah, love the character customization you get in Pathfinder 2. And yes, that can totally be what happens in Golarion, where you have a barbarian using a radioactive uranium rod as a weapon. Here we go, Goloma. These guys are fucking weird. These are all eyes on its head. So it has 8 eyes, and it's a weird horse monster, but this thing is fucking terrified of everything. Like, these guys are just funny because they look so terrifying like demons, and they're like kind of cowardly themselves. They're like afraid of other races, so they try to scare them off, but they're like completely peaceful. They look like a xenomorph, kind of. Weird horse-faced, clawed, bony. They're very setting specific, but still interesting. Some other stuff is Poppet. You can play as like a cursed doll. Oh, here we go, Anati. These are the ones that I like. They look like humans, but they are actually spiders. Large spiders that can transform into a human disguise. And some of them also have like they might have a human disguise, or they might have a humanoid form, like a human spider. They're neat, and I like them a lot. But yeah, that's just kind of going over some of that for Pathfinder 2. What else? Yeah, I wish that they did. I understand why they don't, because climbs, like, alternative movements are a lot better in Pathfinder 2. The thing that I would probably say is probably a better option would be giving them a trait that basically grants them the, what's it called? Here we go, Adaptive Anati, that gives them a humanoid form. But the thing that I would probably say is better would be giving them a, rather than a climbing speed, giving them essentially the climber feat, or whatever it's called, and give them the bonus of like, hey, they get some benefits. Let me see what it is. I know the lizard folk have this. Gizzard. Here we go. Wait, no, cliff scale. You gain the combat climber feat as a bonus feat. Your hands are free when you climb, and when you roll a success, you get a critical success instead. I think they should have just given this as a heritage option for the either a heritage option or a feat for the Anati. And it's honestly what I would like. I've actually made a Arachne homebrew for Pathfinder 2, and I actually gave that as essentially their base trait. So they have that as a base trait, and then they also have actually I think that's all they had, come to think of it. And then they could choose to get fangs from their heritage or from their ancestry feats. I'm actually going to see if I can pull that up so I can share that homebrew. I can see my avatar is randomly freaking out because of the AC. Homebrew. Oh, wait, where do I have this? Here we go. All right. So here's what I got. So some interesting bits was Arachne in the homebrew that I had. They were a large player character. So despite that, they only could attack creatures within range 5 of them, so they didn't actually gain additional reach like normal large-sized creatures would. They use equipment that is built for medium-sized creatures as well. They also gain access to the combat climber feat. Where did I put that? Wall crawl right here. You gain the combat climber feat. And then also their weapon size, their equipment is sized down. Had a few race or a few heritages and stuff, such as Stalker, which gains low light vision, Hunter, which gains a bonus to its walking speed, Leapers, which basically are medium-sized creatures that use small-size equipment, and they can also are better at basically doing long jumps and high jumps. Had like some of that were a little bit more esoteric. Like I had a masked one that could transform into a human shape. Deft Arm, which basically gave them an additional 2 arms on their body instead of pedipalps. And then Chelicerae, which basically gives Chelicerae, which gave them a fang weapon, essentially. And then they also had feats where you could upgrade the spider bite and stuff, as well as use it to inject venom. Gave them advantages to squeeze. You could take feats that give them low light vision or dark vision. Weaver, where they can essentially create thread, stuff like that. And then one down at the bottom was like literally giving them a giant spider transformation form if they were certain races and stuff. I didn't really think too much about the level 17 feats though. Also, the Anati were actually, at base, they're half spider, half humanoid. The humanoid basically would be a heritage that you take. As far as good witch options for 5e, generally you're going to be limited to just wizard. Just making a wizard and then reflavoring it. Warlock is also another option. It kind of depends on what your idea for what a witch is. If it's a witch that's basically kind of studying magic, then yeah, you'd want to do a wizard. If you want to do a witch that's basically taking power from a powerful entity and making pacts, that would be a warlock. Going through what Pathfinder 2 offers, they have witches as well. And just to kind of show off what that's like, that. They are still full on casters, so they're very similar to wizards, except instead of having a spell book, all their spells are contained in their familiar, and their familiar basically allows them to they pull the spells from the familiar to cast them. Honestly, the idea that you have, Lucid, I would probably say would be better realized in Pathfinder. Namely just because Witch as a whole, they've kind of always had they've always had ideas for it. Like hell, I remember in Pathfinder 1 they had a witch option that was like hair witch or something, where like literally you had prehensile hair. And so one idea that I saw was a multi-class of a witch and a gunslinger. And the idea would basically be that the dwarf is wielding, like you have a dwarf who's using his beard to reload his gun. Howdy, howdy. But on another note, so I have mentioned that I am kind of done mostly with Pathfinder, or not Pathfinder. I'm mostly done with 5e, but I do have some homebrews that I want to share because I think they're pretty neat and I like how they came out. Let me open these up. So I mentioned I had a D&D video on guns. I have also made homebrew for guns. Not the best, or it's always to taste, because homebrew is never going to be a one-size-fits-all thing. But just to go through some of the ideas that I had for this. The idea basically was that this was more for like a Weird West style setting, and it was to make weapons that are on par with the existing weapons. So they're not like ridiculously stronger or anything. Now you might see these and see, but wait, these are doing 2d8, 2d6, etc. And while they are, they also have this property known as ballistic, which prevents them from adding their weapon mod or your physical modifier to the damage die. So if you have a +4 to hit or +3 to hit, you're not getting that to damage. So as a result, their damage is a little bit more variable and a little bit less predictable. Some other properties that they had is if they had the breach property, that basically meant that you could reload. You could fire a number of shots before needing to reload, and you would reload automatically as long as you weren't within range of a hostile creature and you didn't take damage. If you took damage on your turn or before your turn, you'd have to make a DC 10 dexterity saving throw, or equal to half the damage taken, sort of like concentration. And yeah, that's the idea. People like to say that, oh hey, it's a matter of accuracy. But accuracy should more kind of tie into... I feel like this emulates it better because this makes their critical hits actually stronger. Because when you get a crit with a handgun, you're getting a 4d6 rather than a 2d6. So, this kind of embodies a whole, like, hey, when you roll higher, you're getting that crit. Though it's kind of hard because you can only get a crit on a nat 20. That's one thing that's neat with Pathfinder 2's guns, is that higher accuracy translates to more critical hits, which is cool. Some other stuff that I also have in here. I'm also really happy with how I handled the shotguns here. The idea with them is that they have, well, first off, they have a point blank property, which increases their damage die when they're within a certain range. So you have to get close. Second thing they have is the scatter property. This automatically does a bit of damage to surrounding targets whenever you hit a target. And automatic damage is iffy, but the idea is if it's resisted at all, it does no damage. And if there's also precedent for other attacks and other skills and abilities to use automatic damage. Green Flame Blade, for instance, automatically did damage to surrounding targets, and it scaled pretty well. So I don't think scatter damage is really that bad. The other thing that they have is the weapon actually attacks in a line. So basically, if you miss the target, you have to keep drawing the line behind that target until you hit something. If the attack misses, it basically allows it to reliably hit things, but it also means that it's very easy to hit things that you don't mean to. Other properties that I've thought of before that I didn't implement with this was like the ability for it to downgrade the degree of cover that things have, but creatures are always treated as full cover. Just as one idea. But that's just one way to handle it. Other homebrews that I got. To couple with guns, here is the Spellslinger, aka Gun Wizard. And bullet properties, no, one thing that people always do with firearm homebrew is they always try to implement like diverse weapon types and unique ammunition. I didn't want to do that because that's more of like getting into magic item territory, and I wanted to focus on just the mundane elements. But Gun Wizard. Give the wizard a gun, please. The ideas with them is that they are basically a wizard that channels their spells through their gun. So, Inscribed Irons, basically they gain proficiency with guns as well as crossbows. So this also can work with vanilla. Then the idea is this would work with the firearm options I presented. Essentially, this also could work with the DMG options as well. But the idea is basically they can choose a weapon type, or let me gather my thoughts here. Basically, whenever they cast a spell using a spell slot, some of the magic is siphoned into the weapon and is stored for 1 minute. When you attack with a charged weapon, it uses your intelligence instead of the dexterity for the attack, and deals bonus damage equal to the level of the spell that charged it. Attacking with a charged weapon does not require ammo as a result. So as a result, you get to ignore the loading property for a charged shot. So if you don't have to reload. And it makes it magical as well. Additionally, I also introduced like, hey, depending on what weapon type you choose to make your special wizard gun, you gain other bonuses. Like if it's a light weapon, you get rapid shot, and you can use your when you attack with your attack action, you can attack with another weapon, and basically make it a to do a secondary attack. Scatter or point blank basically pushes the target 5 feet away on a hit, and also increases the scatter damage while also ignoring creatures of your choosing. So it makes scatter weapons a lot stronger. Lucid, you're just talking about an artificer at this point, because that's what literally the artificer functions like. They can get specialized wands that basically are essentially just, you can flavor them as just guns that cast firebolt. And this is a homebrew subclass for the wizard. Well, the schools of magic, that'd be totally up to the player and stuff. Because the thing is, when you choose an arcane tradition, traditionally you would choose actually a spell school. This is like the Blade Singer, where you choose this instead, or the Warcaster. Some other stuff that you get, getting at 6th level, when you attack with a cantrip, you can make a weapon attack as a bonus action. It uses your intelligence instead of dexterity, but it doesn't gain any charges or anything. And then one thing that I thought that was pretty interesting as a feature was the concept of magic bullet, where you basically get to load a spell into a bullet, and then when you shoot, the spell goes off at that location. So you can use that to store a spell, like store a spell earlier, and then when you shoot a target, the spell will go off at that target's location. And then lastly, they can summon up a construct of their gun and have that fight alongside them. And basically, whenever they cast a spell or attack, their gun also fires off, targeting a creature of their choice. Yeah, those were just two of the ideas that I had. I also had more. And I'm going to pull them out because I can. For instance, I want to be a cowboy, baby. I did this homebrew like 2 years ago, and then I kind of forgot about it, and then I looked at it and was like, you know, this is kind of fine. I'm going to go ahead and publish this. But yeah, the idea with this is start a combat, you can use quick draw, deal bonus damage to the target that you quick draw on when they attack, and if you hit them, you basically just cause their attack to automatically miss no matter what. And the thing is, your attack roll has to be higher than theirs. So it doesn't actually target their AC. So if they roll a nat 1, guess what? Your quick draw will always hit them. Meanwhile, if they hit your friend and they rolled like a 15, and then you roll a 17, you intercept their attack and hit them instead, even if their AC was 20. It's a weird little contest that you can only do once per initiative. Then also just gave them basically a bonus to mounted. Gave them find steed because why not? I think it kind of makes sense in this case. Yes, it's a paladin skill, but I think it really makes sense for this. Iron Grit, that's just a defensive ability. Tumble, when an attack misses you, you can use your reaction to attack them, and then also reposition. And the idea is basically just they can just get in there or get out of there. And then Dirty Fighting, they basically can either fan the hammer or take a hostage. And fan the hammer is a specialized attack that is just done as a single action. You can target any number of creatures within range of your weapon or weapons up to your wisdom modifier and make one range attack against each. And there's no limit on how many times you can do this. So if your gun is loaded and you have enough shots in it, you can just bang, 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 bang. I don't know if I should actually make it ignore the loading property or not. But then Scapegoat basically is more for melee. If you get into melee, when you grapple a target, you can grapple them as a bonus action first off. While you have them grappled, you have cover from all sides. Half cover specifically. And if an attack misses you, it has to be re-rolled against your victim. I'll go ahead and just post these in the chat after I'm done showing them off. I got one more to show off, because this was actually the very first, here is actually the very first homebrew that I ever made. Or the very first subclass homebrew. It's literally a magical girl warlock. Wait, this is not the right one. Guardian. Where is it? Where did I put it? Here we go. Let me actually make sure this is public. Come on, save. Okay. So this one I'm also really proud of, and this one is actually probably my favorite out of I've ever done. The idea basically behind it is I kind of wanted to kind of have thematics that would fit anything from Madoka Magic as a Sailor Moon to Cardcaptor Sakura. Because it kind of makes sense. You're getting your power from somebody else, or from a greater entity. There's a bit of flavor text here that describes it, but the idea is basically your expanded spell list includes a lot of support abilities such as Cure Wounds, Bless, Beacon of Hope. Also includes Wish at level 9, similar to the Genie. The core ability that it gets is Alter Ego, which is your magical girl transformation. On your turn, you can basically use a bonus action to end your turn, which basically puts you into the state where attacks against you have disadvantage for the next round. And if you get attacked, if they're melee attacks, they take automatic radiant damage. When the transformation completes at the start of your next turn, you gain a bonus to your AC equal to your charisma modifier. So buff ups your AC so you can be more on the front line. You have advantage on acrobatics checks, and jumping is basically increased. I don't know if I'd actually keep that or not. I would maybe remove that. Acrobatics, though, it does make sense. But the idea is basically just kind of give you a passive jump spell, because magical girls can do that shit. Your weapon attacks may use your charisma modifier instead of your strength or dexterity, so similar to the Hexblade, except this is a temporary buff rather than a permanent thing that you always have going on. And yeah, Magical Child is something that I've seen in Pathfinder and stuff, and that kind of clued me in that, this is probably possible. And then also they just have an offensive ability where when they get hit, they can use their reaction to reduce the damage and move. So it gives them a little bit more survivability, so they're meant to more be on the front line without wearing heavy armor. And then they can also use a spell slot to do the transformation again if they need to. Interestingly enough, there's also text in here that I've included that people who see them in their alternate ego form do not recognize them unless they know who they are or witness them transform. So it's a weird situational kind of disguise thing, and I think that's kind of thematically appropriate for it. Some other things that they also have, kind of built this class being supporty in mind. The level 6 ability they get is essentially a little bit weaker. There's no disguise check, because it's on, like, they literally magically cannot recognize them unless they have, like, True Sight. True Sight is able to see through this kind of thing, so True Sight would bypass it. Yes, you can commit crimes as a magical girl and face no consequences. There's more to that, though. Soul Shield is basically the support ability. Whenever a creature takes whenever you transform, you can buff up your allies' temporary hit points. And if somebody gets dropped to 0 hit points, you can use your reaction to take on any remaining damage and instead drop them to 1. So it does make them invulnerable to further attacks until the end of the current turn. So if, like, a dragon is mauling your fighter and they go down on the first hit, you can use your reaction on them, and then the dragon is unable to hurt them for the rest of the turn until their turn is over. And the thing is that whenever they did that, you took on any of the remaining damage. So it's not like it's completely incapacitating everybody's damage, or it's completely negating all the damage. There's still a cost to it, but it's sacrificial. The ability that I'm probably most proud of, because it's just very thematic, would be Emotional Incognito. They basically learn Calm Emotions, which is a very good spell, and they don't need to concentrate on it. Or they do need to concentrate, but it can't be broken from damage. And they can cast it once per long rest for free. And additionally, when they're in their alter ego state, they can cast this spell and also rewrite people's memories to make them forget that they ever saw them. But only as far as their alternate ego state is concerned. If they've seen them outside of the alter ego state, they will not forget that. But they can only, like, it only affects their memories of this current witness. So, like, if they saw you a week ago transform, or they saw your transform state a week ago, and then you use this on them, like, today, they would only forget about seeing you that day. And it's better explained right here. But it's a selective modify memory, essentially. And then lastly, they have basically just Limit Break, which is essentially you choose one of 3 things. Take a guess as a player of Final Fantasy where I got the idea for the name. They can either do a fuckload of damage to something. They can either grant their allies resistance to damage and prevent them from falling to 0 hit points, as well as negating any automatic kill effects such as Power Word Kill. Or they can also give their allies temporary hit points equal to your warlock levels, as well as healing people up. So they basically have a powerful move that they can use once per long rest. Let's see. yeah, once per long rest and stuff, and it's just basically something that can potentially turn the tide. And then lastly, I also came up with 2 invocations that are available to everyone, but still fit these. One is Majestic Familiar. Level 5, you basically can give your familiar a rideable form, make it big so you can ride it. And then the other one is Spirit Card, which basically allows you to just transcribe a spell into essentially a scroll that is in the form of a card, but it's one that anyone can use. But you can only have one available at a time. And it also does consume your spell slot. So yeah, I will go ahead and drop these all in chat. There is the Magical Girl Warlock. Here's the Desperado. Here's the Spellslinger. And here are some firearm rules. Just remember that these are all homebrew, so they're not perfect. I haven't actually been able to test them in an actual game. But I've done math with them a lot and assessed like their mechanical advantage. The guns in particular, I've spent a ton of time with mathematically. I tried to keep things within power with existing concepts. So I'm gonna keep this video uploaded, so it'll still be public and stuff, so people will be able to view it. I'll probably drop these homebrews in the description when I'm done. That way people can access them later. But yeah. So I talked about 5e, talked about my gripes with it, talked about what I liked about it, talked about my gripes with One D&D, showed off some of my homebrew, talked about a lot about Pathfinder 2, what I like there. I guess if y'all have any questions you wanted to ask about any other systems. I also play Lancer a lot. Lancer is very fun. Actually, I guess I can kind of fire off Cyberpunk. I can't answer that, unfortunately, because I haven't played Cyberpunk Red yet. I'm planning to play it and get started with it. The thing I will suggest, there is if you go to DriveThruRPG, there is Cyberpunk Red Easy Mode available from the creators. And that basically is a introductory module and introductory rule set to get you started with Cyberpunk with... It doesn't have all the options available, and character creation is kind of limited. They only give you fixed character sheets, but they explain how to read the character sheets and how to use them. So start with that, check that out, and you can try running that to play the game and try to start to understand the system. As I mentioned, Cyberpunk is a D10-based system rather than D20. So the only things you really use, I think, are D6s and D10s. But I'm looking forward to trying it just because I love the genre of Cyberpunk as a whole. Lancer, I will answer those Lancer questions in a moment. Is there anything that you use to balance your homebrew classes? First up, not a point total. There's no way to properly calculate that. What you can do, however, is think about things in terms of damage per round, as well as think about some rough estimates. Damage per round, if you're basing it on the same number of attacks, you don't have to worry about accuracy. And if you're not factoring in advantage. However, you have to factor in advantage and the number of attacks you make, you have to factor in accuracy as well. So you have to be conscious of that, and you want to look at what other classes in the game already are able to do. So like, for instance, on the Magical Girl Warlock, the signature move, this 10d10 radiant damage. That's a lot of damage. However, it is a success or fail spell, essentially, and has half damage. It also grants the bonus of putting advantage on the target. So this is pretty strong, but then you compare it to the Fiend Pact Warlock, which literally is just automatic 10d10 psychic damage. And there is no save on that. It's just automatic damage, and it banishes the target for 1 round as well. So I kind of use that as like a guideline. I basically introduced the advantage aspect and the fact that it is modular, so you can choose to do that, and then I removed it being completely automatic, as well as removing the banishment effect. So I kind of adjusted things around there. That's just kind of one way to kind of think about it. When it came to like the homebrew for the guns, I was able to basically put these in different scenarios, or specifically I actually made a damage calculator that determined how strong a weapon would and what its average damage would be based on what you needed to roll on the die. Because every single time you roll on the die, you basically are measuring that, adding your attack modifier, and then comparing that to the armor class. So essentially, it is the die value plus AC, or no, plus attack minus AC. And if that is 0 or greater, you hit. So as a result, you can use that to determine what you need to roll on the die for something to be positive, or to be 0 or higher. So by taking that around, you can basically back calculate the accuracy. So if something only needs a 6 to hit, that means it hits on rolls between 6 and 20, and from 1 to 5, it does not hit. That means it has a 75% chance to hit. So then you can use that to determine what the average damage will be. You basically can use that to generate a list of like all the damage values that you get, factor in how much it does on a crit, and then you average that all together out of 20, and that tells you the average damage per round that is going to do in that situation. And then you can kind of do that for a bunch of different ACs and determine how accurate they are. The thing with these guns that's interesting is they actually get stronger slightly the higher the AC is on something, whereas they get way weaker. Or wait, no. Let me look at my calculator. I might have that backwards. It's been a while since I've checked that up. Damage estimator. All right. Okay, that was actually for something else. Where did I put it? I know I have something here. Percentage shirt. Well, I'll show this one. This one is a little bit more complicated than what I want to show. This is a damage calculator that I've used to assess Pathfinder 2, because people always say that the fighter is significantly stronger. This factors in basically the minimum d20 you need to roll on each attack. So like, and then this also shows like the cumulative damage that you're probably doing each turn based on averages. So yeah, it gets kind of complicated and it's a lot of numbers, but you can see the chart right here. This shows basically, since Pathfinder 2, you crit on when you roll a nat 20 as well as when you roll 10 or higher. This also shows like the percent chance to crit based on the number you need to roll on the die. Like for instance, you can't roll between 0 and 21 and higher. Like these are not possible values. This is the only possible range right here. But I decided to show these because this also factors in things like other bonuses and stuff, and it's mainly just for completion purposes. But yeah, you basically can determine, you don't have to be as complicated as this, but you can use a method like this to determine the average damage per round. Let's see. So backing up a little bit then, going back. Lancer. So let's talk about Lancer a little bit. Lancer is a really fun system. As far as its action economy goes, it's actually one of my favorite aspects about it, because the two action, like, you have 2 actions on your turn, but they can't be the same action. If you want to attack with multiple weapons, you have to do a barrage, which means you have to lock yourself in place and attack with all weapons at once. You can't, like, break up your movement. I really like that with Lancer and stuff. The things I don't like with Lancer is that it has a lot of situational stuff, so there's just so much to keep track of on your character sheets, and you forget stuff all the time, and it's really frustrating. It's also pretty tough. Like, the way that it's built is very tactical, so it actually kind of encourages some meta play, which is honestly a good thing for It's useful for DMs because they don't have to worry about players metagaming too much. But it does make things very hard. And the hard part is like sometimes there still is sometimes a problem with metagaming and stuff, where like there's like one argument between two of my friends who both DM Lancer and stuff, and they couldn't come to a consensus. One of them thought that, well, a rogue AI who's commanding a bunch of enemy robots and stuff would know to eventually start prioritizing them to go after higher value targets. Whereas my other friend was thinking, no, they should go after whatever is closest and just attack the first thing they see. And so, kind of a debate between them there. Overall, my favorite mechs in Lancer, I really like the Monarch. It's just fun. It's fun to do missiles. It's a simple build. You get flight on it, and then tactician. You can always have accuracy, which is great. I also really love the Atlas. The Atlas being able... Here, actually, I'm going to pull up CompCon so I can show off some of the artwork and stuff, so that way it's relevant. We don't see 5e constantly. So, some of my favorites. I love the Atlas. This thing is so stupid, so fragile. You're going to probably die, but you don't care because you're gonna rules of nature that bitch. No, the Atlas is a tiny size. It's a giant killer. The one with the giant FU laser is the Barbarossa. Very big boy who charges up the Apocalypse Rail, and when it counts down enough, it's an anti-ship weapon. It's very big, and it also has a siege cannon itself, which is very strong. Yeah, the melee one is the Zhang. Zhang is also pretty cool. You get a big fist weapon. It also is just like, hey, once per turn you basically can just rip up terrain. So it just smashes through shit. And then it also has a super heavy melee weapon, which does just a normal 1d6 normally. But then when it's charged up, it hits very, very hard. Yeah, I played an Atlas before, and the Atlas was, I literally called it Rules of Nature. One thing that's really funny, where is it at? The Jägerkunst. This protocol is stupid. If you are in an arena that has enough cover and enough obstructions around you, the idea is basically, whenever you move adjacent to a object or freestanding piece of terrain larger than you can jump off of it and move 2 spaces in any direction, ignoring engagement, reactions, etc. You can do this as many times, but only once per unique piece of terrain. This means if there's enough objects, you can jump, 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 and move all around the map without ever spending any movement, which I've done before. I moved about 50 spaces without ever actually consuming my movement and attacked, like... It was just stupid. It was very stupid. It was hilarious. It was stupid, though. And then I also had Skirmisher on that and stuff, so I could just further lunge at things. I'm too fast as some other ones that I've played that are really fun. Lich. The only thing I wish about the Lich was that it didn't hog so much of the turn order because its features are so dense, but it's very fun to use and very messed up and annoying. To like, hey, I'm going to attack this target, and then you teleport in front of them, you scream, you take damage, and then you teleport back away. And then you're immune to the damage. Lich is fun. It's a great controller frame. Another one I've also played is the Kobold. Just a shitty little guy. It's just a little guy. It's got a main ox mount, which is great. But just going with a Kobold and a Jackhammer round from the Siege Specialist, it's very nice. Fusion Rifle isn't that great. What else? I've also played Death's Head. Death's Head was actually my very first frame, and I've actually made a Homebrew Lancer frame because I wanted to see a sniper mech that was not as tech savvy as the Death's Head. And so I'll go ahead and pull that up. Guess what? I got even more homebrew, everyone. I've got Pathfinder, got homebrew out wherever you want it. I got Lancer homebrew, got goddamn Pathfinder homebrew, Pathfinder 2 homebrew, got 5e homebrew, got all the homebrew you ever could want. But anyway, I call it the Ivan. And it is a sniper mech, an artillery mech, IPSN, that is, instead of being a tech attacker, it's like a instead it's more of a, what's it called? It's more of a grungy sniper, I guess. It's also a frame that I made because I wanted to see a super heavy sniper rifle. And the idea with it is it can unfold as a protocol, and when it's unfolded it gains ordnance. So you have to use it right away. And it's super heavy. It does 3d6 plus 3 kinetic plus 1d6 energy. And it's also accurate and armor piercing, which is great. When it's folded up, however, it becomes, basically the idea behind it is that it is an electronically augmented sniper rifle, so it charges up the rounds, making them into a payload that kind of fragments the enemy's systems, and also just makes it stronger. You can also fold back the barrel so it's no longer using physical ammunition and just becomes a close-range lightning projector with a range 8. So it becomes kind of like a CQB weapon. And when it's folded up, you can use it to skirmish. So, which is good because this thing only has 2 mounts. So you're using that flex mount properly for the super heavy slot. So builds like that. You can also just go with a normal anti-material rifle as well and just use the flex slot for, like, I don't know, the SMG that it has. Some other ideas that I had for it. Instead of basically being like the Death's Head, which is focused on getting accuracy, this thing instead, when it has accuracy, it can give it up to gain reliable on its attack. So it becomes a very reliable way to do, to basically gain the benefit, to basically put reliable on any weapon, but you have to give up accuracy for it. Retreating fire, that basically is just when you miss, you can move up to 3 spaces without provoking, and you can do this even when slowed, so it's basically good at slipping away. Couple that with the second tier weapon that it gets a CQB rifle. It counts as both. On hit, the target can actually not take reactions, so essentially it always has a cheap disengage option. If it misses, it's able to just move away. If it hits, the target can't take reactions, so it can just move away. It can't throw piss, but it can throw a sensor mine. Mainly all the sensor mine does is when it lands in an area, targets must pass an agility save. On failure, they lose hidden, gain lock-on, and their invisibility is suppressed for 1 round. Allies are unaffected. Sensor mine does the same thing. Then its last trait that it has is when it's prone, opponents do not gain accuracy for targeting you, and if you're targeted by a range attack, you can drop prone as a reaction to gain soft cover against the triggering attack. You can't take this reaction if immobilized or if already prone, and rising from prone only costs you 2 movement rather than all your movement, so it basically is a lot more resistant to prone as a result. And then its core system is deadly aim. Basically for the rest of the scene, the weakness identification that I mentioned before, the reliable thing, basically you have reliable as long as you have accuracy. You no longer have to give it up. And additionally, when you hit a target at range 8 or greater away with a ranged weapon, you can force them to make a hull save, and then you inflict your choice of slowed or stunned. If stunned, they automatically succeed on any future saves against this trait. So you can basically slow them as long as you want, but as soon as you decide to stun them, you can no longer use that trait on them. And the idea is basically you're kind of hitting a valuable part of them, and it kind of is like, winds up being a control thing, winds up helping keep them away, supporting your allies, as well as making life easier for you. Then what else did I got on this? Oh yeah, one small thing with this. Withering adaptations. So the Nelson has the Bulwark mods, which basically are very simple 1 SP system. It just allows you to ignore difficult terrain. This is not as good as that. Where did I put it? It only allows you to ignore the first space of difficult terrain when moving. Also applies when prone, however. So you can crawl, like, you can crawl and not give up all your movement. But the other thing that it also offers is that when you're in difficult terrain, so it has to be actual terrain, so it has to be like a sandpit or brush or something like that, you can actually take the hide action even when in plain sight, similar to the infiltrator talent. So the idea is basically like you're hiding in the mud or hiding in the brush, and you're taking advantage of that to get hidden. And I think that's a little unique interaction. And then the last things that it has, just to go over those really quick, Zebo munitions. It basically allows you to take on 1 point of heat to gain basically wall penetration. The weapon's range is converted to line of sight. It passes through terrain and other obstacles, and it can ignore line of sight, however, cover still applies. So this also means that because it becomes a line weapon, if you basically position the line so it goes through multiple targets, if it misses the first one, you get to roll it on the second one until it finally hits one of them. It stops as soon as it hits a character. Which apparently I accidentally erased that earlier. Then the other thing that it also had was a UAV that you could deploy. And this is just a simple little drone system. It's invisible, flies at about 50 feet, and it scans anything within a range 10 below it. Or, what was it, range 10 or range 15? Range 5. So anything within range 5 below it, relative to as if it were on the ground. Characters inside that area, if they're invisible, you hit them on a roll of 1 to 4 rather than 1 to 3, you and your allies both, and hostile characters cannot hide there. And then any characters in that area do not benefit from cover. So you combine this with the Sabo munitions, you basically have perfect wall hacks, because you can hit the target, and you get to ignore the cover. And so you can just shoot through walls. Take a vacation straight to hell. But yeah, that's otherwise the Ivan. I might actually have this published sometime soon. I don't know. I like it, though. But yeah, Lancer's pretty cool. Yeah, and the idea behind it was basically a grungier, dirtier sniper, one that's a little bit more... it just plays out differently compared to the Death's Head. The Death's Head has the advantage of having a very big sensor range, and it's not, and it has some really good like tech things like the tracking bug, etc. The Ivan doesn't get any tech attacks or anything. It has a decent sensor range still, but doesn't really have any systems that directly target the enemies. Most it has is the UAV and the sensor mines, but it doesn't actually have any tech attacks that are granted by it. So it's distinct from the Death's Head as a result. And it's still kind of, in my opinion, it still fits the idea of a sniper. It's just going about it from a different way. The Death's Head is trying to up its accuracy and make its hits more reliable, whereas the Ivan is trying to make its hits more critical and deadly. Anyway, probably going to start wrapping up soon here. Did any of you all have any other little questions about tabletop stuff that you wanted to ask? 5e, Lancer, Pathfinder, Pathfinder 2, other systems, video games, voice requests. Hexagons are actually pretty nice, especially in Lancer. Lancer is designed with hexagons in mind, and man, I kind of want to just use hexagons permanently for everything. Hexagons are underrated. Squares get the job done, and if you're using like non 5e's rules for ranges and stuff. Like you're using Pathfinder's rules and stuff. Squares still work fine because like you can still draw out. The range still works out, but you just have to calculate it. Insect people. Let's look at Pathfinder 2 for that. Sure there are insect people. If there's not, I know there are from other ones. Size changing models is a little bit rough for everything, no matter what system you're in, and no matter what you're using. Bug people. Bug. Where's bug? Is there a bug? I don't remember any actual bugs. They do have shisks, which are humans with quills, basically. I don't think there's actually any explicitly bugs other than beast folk, which I'll go ahead and pull those up. Oh yeah, that's actually a versatile heritage. So you can literally make anybody into this beastkin. See, look, there's a little bug dude. He's a beastkin dwarf. So the idea is that they're kind of like skinwalkers or lycanthropes. And they can basically have both a human form as well as they can shapeshift and stuff. They'll probably introduce some kind of bug race eventually. Anadi is the only baseline ancestry that's insect-like. Specifically a spider, so not really an insect, but you know what I mean. Beast folk, however, is a good way to kind of get that. Because again, you can play a bug. And again, this is like a dwarf or a gnome. It's a heritage, so you can slap it on literally any race. So technically, rules as written, I mean, your DM probably would hesitate to allow it. You can technically have an automaton that is a beastkin, which is silly. Oh wait, it says right here, only creatures with the humanoid trait can take it. So no, you cannot make an automaton beastkin. So that is actually intercepted. They thought about that, which is good. However, androids are humanoid, so you can have an android beastkin. Some other interesting heritages that they also have. I just want to show off this one. It's called a flesh warp. And it's weird. Where is it? Oh wait, no, flesh warp is actually an ancestry. I'm still going to show it off, though. Here we go. It's literally somebody who has experimented on, or some reason they are basically mutated, and they're aberrations, basically. Is really creepy. Yeah. And again, like, one thing I will say on homebrewing for Pathfinder, homebrewing races for Pathfinder 2 is actually really easy. It's just time consuming because you have to do a lot, but it is so much easier than doing it in 5e because you don't have to worry about balancing everything against itself. Any features that you want to put, you can just make it a class or an ancestry feat. You just limit how many things they get naturally to like 1 or 2 features, and that's it. I think it makes things really easy to do. Because like if you look at Android, for instance, the only things that they get low light vision, they have advantage on, or they have +1 against diseases, poisons, and radiation, and then they have a penalty to diplomacy and performance, as well as sense motive. Sprites, for instance, they just get low light vision and then magical strikes. Like, these are really simply done, and then all the flavor comes from the heritages and the feats. So it's all really modular, and you can choose what you want. And so as a result, when you're homebrewing it, it's way easier because you don't have to think of everything all together. You only have to think about the heritages and then a few of and then the feats. And if you want to add more features and stuff, you can add more features. And you can be really flexible with it. And you just tune it to something that's about that level. Usually it just comes from the concept of just adapting something from another ancestry. But yeah, homebrewing in Pathfinder 2 is fun. They make it easy. But yeah, otherwise, what else? Thoughts on horror in systems not built for it? Pathfinder and D&D. I think you can run those just fine. Pathfinder 1, interestingly enough, actually had a crossover with Call of Cthulhu where you could actually use Call of Cthulhu's rules for the horror elements of a Pathfinder campaign, which was neat. And it was for one of the occult games, so they introduced things like the psychic and stuff like that in the medium. But horror is a storytelling mode. The thing with, yeah, it's Strange Eons, I think. The thing with horror is it's more of a method of how you tell the story, which is agnostic to systems. It's just that when it comes to the systems themselves, Pathfinder, 5e, etc., still have you as exceptional humans, or exceptional humanoids, and exceptional people. So you still have to remember that the characters are heroes, so the horror has to kind of account for that. And it's not necessarily going to be as scary, but that doesn't mean it can't be scary. I've run Curse of Strahd, and it's a great campaign. I've run it twice, actually, and I like it. But it still is a horror game, ultimately, and there's stuff that you can include that is, like, creepy. That said, if you want the true, like, fearful experience, things like Call of Cthulhu are way better at that, just because the system doesn't makes you a lot more mortal. You're significantly more likely to die. You are fighting back against impossible odds rather than using impossible strength to do the impossible. And, like, I think one good thing for a system that's built for horror is that it accounts for player death and tries to make it as thematic and cool as possible. I think that's actually generally a cool thing to do. Like, Cyberpunk also, from what I've read, kind of is pretty good at handling that. Death is pretty sudden in Cyberpunk, read. But it's serious and stuff when it happens and stuff, and it's like, you kind of just gotta roll with it. But in Call of Cthulhu, there's kind of like, I remember seeing Don't Stop Thinking, he has some great tutorials, and this stuff is really interesting on Call of Cthulhu. But like, he was talking about how there's this curve where you want the players to die not while preparing for the final encounter, but you either want them to die early on if they're going to die, or you want them to die right in the final encounter. You don't want them to die right before they get to the good stuff. And if they're going to die early, you want it to be early enough that they can build up a new character. Let's see, what other questions did I miss here? People, modules, horror systems. Yeah. Well, I'm probably going to wrap up the stream about right here. This is fun. Like chatting with y'all. Been a while since I streamed. Don't know what I'm going to be making next. God, I don't know what I'm going to be making next. I never know. I feel so kind of aimless as of late with what I'm making and what I'm doing. But anyway, I'm going to wrap up the stream here, so thank you all for coming out and watching. So, goodbye, everyone. Yep, you're a little late, Doodle. Sorry. Good night, all.